distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen.
Brother Ray, got a lot of books here. Good to see everybody on the Zoom. Just coming in. We got to start. Welcome to the BK History Club. In honor of, first of all, everybody that just coming in, give yourself a great big hand. Our Zoom audience and the people that's here. Monderson is on his way. And welcome to the BK History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday. What's wrong, man?
Nothing.
We meet here every other Wednesday. In honor. We'll bring the camera to the great Bill Mackey. We're also going to go into Colette Colvin, way before Rosa Parks went on that bus. Colette Colvin was there. Louis Ray Rivera. El-Haj Malik Shabazz, way before his time. Dr. Professor Amos Wilson, explaining everything to us with his collection. Professor Bill Mackey, original member of the Mackey's group. Brother Hassan, may he rest in peace. I miss him so much. The late great attorney at war, Alton H. Maddox. Bad man in the courtroom. And Reverend Sharpton should mention his name every single day because Alton Maddox gave him his freedom. But he never mentions the great Alton. Zoom that camera into the great Alton. Ben Crump couldn't carry his bags. Minister Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Brother Gil Noble. All the individuals, family members, all the individuals that gave up fame and fortune. They could have went the other way. These people were just so wonderful. Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Professor George Simmons. Just unbelievable. Runoko Rashidi, who showed us blacks all over the world. He left us too soon due to the deadly. But so many historians, El-Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, was way before his time. Vicious young man in the early days. Mother and father, a member of the Garvey movement. They called him Satan in prison. Way before his time. And according to Dr. Clark, the system offered him $500,000. And at that time, $500,000 was double to turn. And he didn't do it. So, all of these people, and we also lost another member of the UAM. Is my phone number there? Was charging her. Miss Leola Maddox, I always wear this hat in honor of the members of United African Movement. Alton, Brother Harold. Leola Maddox, who drove an old new car. A Toyota. Toyota gets, you couldn't give me an American-made car. Toyota is the best cars in the world. You could put 500,000 miles on a Toyota and it will ride smooth. A friend of mine just gave his car to his daughter, Toyota, 350,000 miles and you couldn't even hear it. See, the Asians never forgot their history. And remember when you used to buy stuff from Japan and it broke in 2 minutes? Well, not no more. They got everything under lockdown. And Miss Leola came, drove that old car to UAM, believed in bringing people to the meetings. so you could talk to the members, see how they're doing. It's good with technology and Zoom, but it's nothing like coming down and seeing the people and talking to them and talking to the speaker, talking to Dr. Lewis. You see the people. Who is it, Linda? So we never want to, who? Man, give me the phone. We never want to miss these people. So everybody that gave up fame and fortune, all the historians, great Chancellor Williams. So we're going to bring this camera over to the Amos collection. And we have the books, and that's African World Info Systems. Amos. And you zoom the camera in, and you got Blueprint for Black Power. Amos's classic. You want economic stability, you read Amos's classic, Blueprint for Black Power. You have Survival Finished, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat for the Reclamation of the African Mind. And all of our minds have to be reclaimed. We are a suffering people, and it's going to take a lot of years. Black on black violence, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. Whether you want to believe it or not, all the killings throughout the world, everything that we do to each other is controlled by white domination. They fund both sides in Haiti. They fund both wars in the continent of Africa where all the riches. In America, Crips, Bloods, light skin, dark skin, black, white. And the new phenomenon now is Africans versus everybody versus FBAs. I don't even know what an FBA is, African American. So they work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to keep us separated. But we can't see it because some individuals take the money. They drink the Kool-Aid. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. The falsification of African consciousness. Awakening the natural genius of black children. And Louis Ray Rivera's classic, Jazz in Jail. I never want to forget Brother Lou. Brother Louis Ray. And he came down here and spoke. When Mackie left us, Louis Ray came here and he would speak for hours. He even had the Mackie's group on WBAI. And he spoke for hours. And we would walk him to Jefferson Avenue. He lived on Jefferson and Bedford. His wife still lives there in that big brownstone that everybody, that all the small hats and the investors and the dirty scoundrels is trying to take Brooklyn. They done took it already. And she still have that brownstone over there. All of stinking, dirty investors, robbing our houses, tricking us, but we have to watch out because they come and they offer you, the devil comes and offer you all kind of money. They just sold the church on 3rd Avenue where the old pawn shop was, 3rd and Flatbush. Big Catholic church over there. The devil came and got God's people to sell the church for $28 million. And when you sell your religious institution to the devil, you will not win. I don't care how much money they give you. We had a church on Bushwick Avenue. Burnt down. The city of New York under these phony baloney mayors and all these slimes denied the pastor to rebuild that church. And we got the guy on camera. So they're taking our religious institutions and they put in affordable housing and we'll never be able to afford it. Black people, you are done because you're following these devils. Burning place, don't just trying to buy everything. It's sickening. So I got some books here. Please, family, protect yourself. They got a website called Aries, City of New York. And you go in there every 3 months and you check on your deed. It's a free service. You check on your taxes, you check on your deed. And watch these investors, and they call it all over the place. Because Brooklyn is the new New York. See, poor white people cannot go to Manhattan. They don't want them there. So they came to Brooklyn, and our black elected officials sold us down the river. I mean, going all the way back. Adolphus Towns, Al Van, all the people that were supposed to look out for us. So they're in Brooklyn, and they done changed Brooklyn to Manhattan. It's a disgusting place now. So protect your house and do not listen to these people. Because remember when they said, why you want to live in Brooklyn? Why you want to come to that hellhole? Ain't nothing there but ends, prostitutes, Puerto Ricans, and coconuts. They didn't want to come here, drug addicts, crime. But now look. Ladies and gentlemen, the destruction of black civilization, Chancellor Williams. And no matter how much they offer you for your money, for your house, let me explain something to you. Is you got what they offer black people and what they offer other people. It's a whole difference. They offer us so money. And money they offer us. But if somebody else, not your color, sell that same house, they're going to get much more. The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. If you want to know the mistakes we made, and all you Africans coming over here thinking America loves you, thinking they care about you, if anybody knows this European, the African American knows this European. So all you newbies that think you know something is going to come down because they tell everybody, stay away from them people that's already there. America doesn't care about you neither, because when they finish with you, they kick you to the curb. And they're doing it right in front of our face. Our replacements are here. They're fighting over all of them. They're fighting over them. They're protecting them. And we still can't get a bill passed. All the mistakes we made in the motherland, in the land of the black, from the Arab slave trade to the Great Pyramids, the civilizations, you could fit Europe and Africa 3 times. And it was never unity. The place was too big. The civilizations were strong. But they fought against each other. The grand armies, 50,000 men. But Africa, the land of the black, was old, beaten, and the invaders came in. Because they was watching, because everybody came there to learn. And we were too nice, same way we're too nice now. If they would have had an army in Tulsa and all those great economic communities we had in America, we did not have the army to protect it. So they came in and did what they had to do. But Chancellor Williams, great book, and then you could go to where he got his information from. Arab slave trade was first, the European slave trade was second, not the transatlantic slave trade. The European slave trade. And if anybody wants to make that claim, oh, Africans sold Africans, then bring the information, the documentation. Bring the documentation.
90% worth.
The Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1617. The Portuguese came and they was watching. Queen Nzinga of Angola, and when she went to negotiate with these barbarians, the Portuguese, and how they came in, they wouldn't even let her sit down. And the brothers made a bench for her. Sisters, read this book. Now we let them talk about she's a hood rat looking for cheese. That's what they have us say. African or American? Black identity crisis in New York, 1784 to 1861. Slavery by another name. The re-enslavement of black Americans from the Civil War to World War II. They got somebody in Detroit, Michigan, the Motor City, talking about they want another study. Detroit had voted for reparations. Well, how come they never have this book? The hangings. How come they never have this book? The Asians got their reparations. The lynchings, where they throw you in a pot of hot sugar, whether in the Caribbean, Brazil. So when you talk about reparations, it's a global thing. You go for the Arabs first, then you go for the Europeans, then you go for the companies. Because the Jews, that's what the Jews did, and they get theirs. But we don't get nothing. You have people talking about you don't deserve it. And this is in America. But whatever landmass that the European dropped you in, if you didn't fight for reparations in that area where they dropped you off and where you was, the African American was brought here. If you didn't fight over there for the companies that control the natural resources and did the barbaric things to you, please be quiet. Please shut up. John Conyers, H.R. 40, had that bill up there that's collected dust from out of Detroit. Collected dust. And the European can't take care of their own. And if you don't believe me, look at the Strecker family who pushed that oxy and that other new drugs that the corporations, and see how many white folks is messing with it. Out in the Midwest, here in New York, all over. Crystal meth. So, white folks, if you think America cares about you, you are out of your mind. Dr. Ben, great civilizations, how they built the pyramids, perfect. The languages. So we never want to forget Dr. Ben. Skull, pushed back, man's origin. The statues. So you got to remember, when you do presentations on that great continent and the civilizations, and if a person never been there, it's good to show some kind of pictures so they could know. I've never been there, but Dr. Ben and them always been there all the time. Cynthia McKinney, how the U.S. creates S-hole countries, and when China sneezes from the coronavirus to the economic lockdown. And if those people in Georgia couldn't carry Cynthia McKinney's bags, she was the only one that cared about the people of Georgia. U.S. Senator Cynthia McKinney. And all her lectures is on YouTube, they're putting them on. In every country that's an S-hole country, Cynthia McKinney tell you how they created it. The CIA. The manufacturing of a president. Everybody loves Barack Hussein Obama. But until you read these books on him and find out how they brought him in squeaky clean, sealed the records. You read books on individuals. I don't care what color they are. Barack Obama and Larry Sinclair. The Michelle Obama Unofficial White House Guide, Rights and Privilege to Transgender. These are books. These are books. So don't tell me they're going to ban books. People, you find them all in the street. Unofficial White House Guide to the Rights and Privilege of Transgender. Documents from President Obama's administration. Take what you need and the rest you leave it alone. Angola. You better not do nothing in Louisiana. Huntsville. Massive prison. So when me and my wife went to family reunion in New Orleans, we went to the museums. See, everything down there at the French quarters is not, it's basically a love shack. All kind of stuff going down. But it's history down there. So you go to the museums. And I brought this book because Angola, you will spend the rest of your life in Angola. Huntsville, and all them prisons down south. They grow their own food. And it's on 3 plantations. And they had live slave auctions in the early days. And they probably still have them now. Here's a brother working the fields. But you think we learn? No. Portraits of the 16 Mississippi riders, and you had some white folks down there too, fighting. So all the dues that we paid, all the dues that happened, all the men that fought hard, didn't have no rights, and you're gonna come to this country and talk about, you ain't did nothing. Fighting. Mugshots. So all you newbies gonna come to this, do not listen to that nonsense. Booker T. Washington and the making of a Pan-Africanist. Tyreen Wright. Just picked this up, this book, because I'm getting up there in age, and everybody is getting up there in age, and we have to do a lot of studying. Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers by Ralph H. Blum and Mark Sloan, MDs. Because I'm in the same category. I'm getting old and things is happening. No more unnecessary biopsies, radical treatments, or loss of sexual potency. So this is a book that I have read, and I'm trying to read everything for health, because health is wealth. And you read books and you try things. Dope Incorporated, the book that drove Henry Kissinger crazy, and medical marijuana is all over the place. They smoking it, the whites are smoking it. Brooklyn is a weed poison. They walking up and down the street, they waiting in front of the weed spots before they get to the liquor stores. And George Soros is the man behind it, and he controls the Democratic Party. Everybody is smoking this stuff. And they're crazy, and you can't say nothing. So you go ahead and vote for whoever you want to vote for. Democratic Party, the gangs of New York. You want to know the history of the gangs, from the Dead Robins to the Bowery Boys to the 5 Points to the LA gangs. You read the history of gang violence in New York, and they talk about the Irish. And the Irish and the Italians. And they did not like what Hollywood portrayed them in this book. Let me go a little quick. Reginald Lewis, Baltimore, drug capital, Baltimore City. Reginald Lewis come out of Baltimore. Why should all the white guys have fun? So it tells you about economics, and now he brought beef-rich foods. But all they want to tell you about Baltimore is just a crazy drug dealing murder capital of the world. Reginald Lewis was a bad man. May he rest in peace. And he brought Tropicana and a whole bunch of companies. This is the king right here, y'all. First, the Iceman Inheritance. Michael Bradley, Prehistoric Sources of Western Man's Racism, Sexism, and Aggression. So if you want to know the history of the European, Western, you read a person that wrote the book by them, and he looks just like them. Today is August the 26th. Snick with Stokely Carmichael. August the 26th, Wednesday, 1963, W.E.B. Du Bois, scholar, civil rights activist, and founding father of the NAACP dies in Accra, Ghana. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, American, he was born in Trinidad. And he came here and formed an alliance. So all our Caribbean brothers and sisters, stop listening to that nonsense. Stokely Carmichael, popular, the slogan Black Power, first used by Congressman Adam Clayton Powell. Carmichael wrote the expression, we want control of the institutions and the communities where we live, and we want to stop the exploitation of non-white people around the world. Carmichael, born in Trinidad, moved to the United States. And here we can't get together because you letting people say you don't like the people that's there and this and that. Born in Trinidad, moved to the U.S., attended the Bronx High School of Science, Florida A&M. This is history. And here we can't even get it together because you're listening to other people that work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to keep us separated. Dr. Mackey, Going Home, Book of the Old South. Jews and Negro slavery in the Old South. Excellent book cover. Found this book. Bertrand Wallace, 1789 to 1865. So you want to know the role that the Jews played in slavery? The secret relationship between blacks and Jews, they tell you who ran the slave trade. The auctions. W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction in America. And I'm going to read this. Pancreatic cancer linked to sugar intake. We have to watch it. And this old article. So we have to watch our sugar. And if you're using sugar, you got to flush it out of you. Ayo Kamati, Jews are the problem too. And his other book, The Psychology of the Jews Are the Problem 1. Ayo Kamati, I didn't have the other book. Quickly. Donald J. Trump. Everybody, they ought to check into a rehab. The Donald J. Trump rehab. Because they can't keep his name out of their mouth. Read books on Trump and his father and his grandfather who came here with a dream and a pair of underwear or a suitcase. Everybody knows about them, but everybody's saying them, but they don't have books that you can read. And he was a Democrat at one time. And Sharpton and them couldn't stay out of his pocket. Every time he turned around, he financed Jesse Jackson's campaign on 2 occasions. He financed Harlem hoops in Harlem. He took pictures with Ali, Rosa Parks. But if you listen to other people that don't like who he is, you will fall for it. He was a Democrat. And at one time, the rappers and all these high-profile blacks was looking to take a picture with him in Trump Towers. So get the book and then tell me the book to read and tell me what page to go to. Frederick Trump came here with a suitcase, the same way a whole bunch of other Europeans came to America through Castle Garden, which is present-day Ellis Island. That's why they're making all this crazy stuff about people coming here the wrong way, because they couldn't come the wrong way. That's why this European is going crazy with this illegal. Because they're saying you got to come here the right way. But see, the African American didn't come here through Kessel where they sprayed you down. As soon as you got off the ship, they sprayed you down with lice. They sprayed you down to get the lice off of you, to get the germs off of you. And if you don't believe me, get this book, A Social History Dirt. The Africans civilized Europe. They were called Moors, but they were African. And the umbrella wasn't created to stop rain. It was created because they had no sewer systems and they was throwing the stuff out the window. That's what all this is about. coming to the new world. America was called the new world, but it was an old world. The international Jew, Henry Ford, the work top, the dark money, global manipulation in the federal government. And I'm going to show you something right here, and I'm going to read this real quick, and this is by Tyler O'Neill. Scott Walter, president of Capital Research. O'Neill has, and he talks about the author, O'Neill has relentless, borrowed into the scheme launched by left-wing megadonors like George Soros, Hans Gord Weiss, with the help of unions and left non-profit industry complex together. They colluded with the deep state to reshape our lives. If you disagree with their agenda of forcing men into women's sports, shutting down school choice for parents, blowing out border security, you need to see what O'Neill has uncovered in this neither world. This is just something out of this book. And you read it and you take what you want. The Irish, controlled by the British. Labor, cheap labor, slaves, the cotton plantations. But look at this. The whippings on the slave plantations, the children. But look at this. Look at this. Look at this picture. Huh? Children at work. Look at this. Huh? 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 Look at this. In the factories. Oh, so we the only ones shine shoes, huh? We the only ones shine shoes. So when other races sit up there and talk that nonsense, we the only one picked up rags. Huh? Huh? So if you don't know at least a little bit of history to protect yourself, when somebody opens up their mouth, you're doomed. Empire of their own. How the Jews, Neil Bergman, I'm going to read their title. Empire of their own. How the Jews invented Hollywood. Harry Cohen, William Fox. And it tells you in the movies and music and these big MGM, Paramount, Netflix, and how they disgraced us. Birth of a Nation. Putting all of us in skirts. Read how they set up this Hollywood and how they control the image. And you got to look at why they made the awards, the Oscars. Oscar Merrimack's a black man. Go quietly or else. If you think Donald J. Trump, Biden, Obama, Nixon, Roosevelt, if you think they running something, you out your mind. Here's King, the king. How George Soros and Hillary Clinton, the 60s radicals, took control of the Democratic Party. The man behind the curtain. Soros staying ahead of the curve. The Soros agenda. And the lifetimes and trading secrets of the world's greatest investor. William Buffett has nothing on King George Soros. Everybody is on his payroll. And what they call color revolutions, Black Lives Matter. So what they're doing, they got all these unknown people where you don't even know where they came from. Controlled by the king and his guys. But you have to read the book to understand it. Neither safe nor effective. Capitalism on a ventilator. All of these unknown depths. The cancer industry. Vaxxed versus unvaxxed. And I'm going to tell you something right now. You can say what you want to say about Kennedy. You can say what you want to say about Donald J. Trump. I'm going to tell you right now. When one of the chromosomes hit, when you and your wife get together, as Trust says, and one of the chromosomes and you wind up hitting, and you bring life into the world. God's creation. And soon as that wonderful life comes into the world, the doctors pump the baby with whatever they say vaccine to protect them. Your liver is not as big as this pin, and they're giving you a shot. And then you have to continue because this is what Big Pharma says. And then when our loved ones start acting this and that, and they got the nerve to tell you autism rates will go down. Dr. Scott Whitaker, Medicine, Causes and Solutions to the Medical Sins That Are Killing Us. You did. Rand Paul and the Republican Party did an excellent job of bringing this guy, Fauci. But I didn't have to wait for that. I read the books and I made mistakes because I made mistakes. This book goes back all the way to the HIV and the AIDS crisis, where all our loved ones was, all you have to do is read the book. And I want to thank Rand Paul and the committees for bringing Fauci up. And how are you going to plead the fifth? It's all on. The American Medical Killing Machine. I found this book, The Historical Origin of Islam. One Nation Under Blackmail, The Epstein Files, Whitney Webb. Let me tell you something. Stop talking about all these people that was at the party. Black folks was at the freak party too. Black people was at the freak party too. All the big high profile people was at the freak party. Me and you can't get there. We go to Hunts Point, the Bronx. We can't get there. The Pfizer papers tells you what happens to the blood. And every time you turn around, something's going on. Somebody's going, somebody's leaving. Tells you what happens to the blood. And they had another book, the Moderna papers. It tells you what happens to the blood. And they forced the Pfizer paper. Pfizer is the biggest corporation in the world. Vaccine timeline. Historical context of the vaccine. As soon as Donald Trump said, listen, you don't need all of that, they came out the woodwork. Now all of a sudden everything is going on. The midterm elections is coming. This is rising up. The fires are starting all over again. Now you got contaminated eggs. They're doing the same game. People dying in their sleep. Went to another funeral. Friend I knew, young, vibrant, family, lived in Long Island, didn't wake up. Nobody. Edward Dow, young athletes. All you gotta do is get these books. Edward Dow on Wall Street, he worked for BlackRock. BlackRock controls everybody. Don't you run around and talk about Donald J. Trump when your money is being invested with BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, pension funds. Larry Fink controls all of us. Run around talking about some president who'll be going in a little while. Fools! He'll be going in a little while, and the next person that America picks to run the corporation of America. See, this is a war between the American corporation and the American Republic, for which it stands one nation under God, liberty and justice. The next person that they pick to run this corporation will do the same thing. Because America is a corporation. All right, this is called Crossroads, and my brother Kenji freed Daruba. Everybody, Daruba, you could send money to Daruba, and I don't like what happened down in Atlanta with Daruba because he was up there. But in his prime, it wouldn't have happened. In his prime, And the army he had, the Black Panther Party and all that, in his prime, it wouldn't have happened. But he's living in Ghana. And it's a way you can support Yoruba. COINTELPRO. See, he used to say political prisoners do worse time than regular guys. Political prisoners catch, that's why they don't want no unity. That's why they send you. When you're a political prisoner, you're much more dangerous. Of course, you could get the people, George Jackson, and all the folks. When you're a political prisoner, open up that door for me, Brother Malachi. So, Kenji, in this newsletter called Crossroads, and it has a whole bunch of writings and a whole bunch of stories. Thorough Black Talk, Tag, Keisha, Sister Brooke. They come on every Thursday, the Freeman Bureau. Sister Mama, and they talking about the reparations and the committees together trying to fight. That's every Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, Sister Empress, Brother Lumumba, El Pollinator, Brother Moses. They got a Saturday program, they come on through the week. Blog Talk Radio, the Philadelphia Connection. And you can log on, and Sister Empress and them is bringing down Black August, contribution for blacks. Ayo Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Monday, you get the 8 o'clock, Brother Jamal. 8 to 9, 9 to 10. Dr. Haru, health results, and then 10 to 11, the irritated genie. And then Wednesday they have an economic where they show you Dr. Haru, Brother Red Pill. They show you how to invest, how to do investments, how to make your money grow. Because as Dr. Haru said, you got winners and you got losers. And in order to fund any operation, in order to buy the supplies, you have to have funds. So he tells you about investing. So I want to thank Anthony Mohammed and Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Just go on and say Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. And the program comes on. Especially that the health program. Ayo Kamati tells you everything that's going on in Africa. He's been in Burkina Faso. Now we got Darren Muhammad, State of the City, Baltimore. He might come on tonight, he might come on tomorrow, Thursday. But the Saturday program at 12 o'clock, State of the City, Darren, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Excellent program. We want to give big ups to Brother Darren. And his brother, Kenny Ebron, is telling you all the stuff that's happening in Baltimore City. But they got big plans for Baltimore City. Dr. Clark did a tape, the 40-year plan to take back Harlem. If you could find that from the old UAM days. And it's the same game, same plan they doing in Baltimore and every major black city. That's why they don't mention African Americans. The reason why they're down in the South, because once you conquer the African American vote in the South, Soros and his gang has everything controlled with these candidates that come out of nowhere. New York is done. They don't even mention African Americans. Detroit, done. They only need us for our vote while they take care of everybody else. How you gonna say you're gonna not cooperate with ICE, checking people when they've been beating us, killing us, kicking our door down, snatching us out, and nobody said nothing to help us? Not a crime bill passed. Not a crime bill passed. And if you stop and law enforcement asks you for your paperwork, you better show them. And here you running this stuff. African Echoes, Brother Trust Graham. The African Echoes family has a study group that comes on Friday. And they're doing the psychology of self-hatred, self-defeat. Also, they have the Know Thyself study group. Brother True, Trust is the mediator. They're doing the destruction of black civilization. You get a 1-2 punch. Simotap, Committee to Eliminate Media Offensive to African People. Simotap, Dr. Mack, the Minefield program is still going strong. We put a dent in Netflix, but it's time to go back and get the rest of them. It's trying to tear them up and tell them we're tired of you disrespecting us in media. And the whole world is on us. So I want to thank Simotap. Congratulations to the UNIA for their convention. I wasn't able to make it, but I heard it was excellent down in Baltimore. So we want to thank the UNIA, Michael Duncan, Raymond Dugal, and still carrying on the Garvey name. And they have a store, 13205 Merritt Boulevard, and you can buy stocks. And you could be part of a company and you will not get disrespected. So they're trying to do it one mine at a time. So they had a big convention down there and I heard it was pretty good. Sorry I couldn't make it. But Lady V was down there. So those are just community events. Sorry I took so long, but like I said, it's educational and we're gonna have to spend the rest of our lives studying and learning. So when somebody says something, family, you have to be able to protect yourself because all these newbies that's coming to America, and the first thing they tell them, you see them people there, them blacks there, they don't know nothing. They this and that, they this and that. But when you arm yourself and know a little something, you'll be able to protect your dignity. If not, they tell you anything. So ladies and gentlemen, sorry I took so long. Friend of the Maggie's group, writer for the Daily Challenge, rest in peace, the editor. What was his name?
Tom Watkins.
Tom Watkins. I remember with the Daily Challenge, we read it. It's 75 cents now, but his articles is in the Daily Challenge. Excellent. Taking over for Dr. Ben. He's always welcome. And he's telling you about the mysteries of that brilliant continent, the land of the black. You even had other people running around talking about they built the pyramids. No, they ain't built nothing. Everybody went to Egypt to study. So we taught the world. So ladies and gentlemen, give a great big hand to our good friend, author of many books that you could buy and support. Dr. And listen, I'm gonna say one thing. Putnam and Franklin, they named the street after some rapper. I don't know, Wu-Tang.
ODB.
Who?
ODB.
Okay, yeah, whatever his name is, but they get a big sign on Putnam. In the historical context of Putnam Avenue, nice crowd, even had a city council person changing the name. Also out in East New York, they changed another street and gave the name to some other rapper. Big crowd there. But when we asked to get Jefferson Avenue and Nostrand Avenue next to Sister's Place changed to Sonny Carson, who did more for black people fighting gangs, turned his life around. And his book should be read in every single public school for the youth. The Education of Sonny Abubakar Carson. And none of these entertainment people go down and work with D12 and Sister's Place to try to get a name for Sonny Abubakar Carson. And all you crowds running around here, a rapper. I mean, come on. It's disgusting. Sonny Carson. Game over. Sorry I took so long. Everything I said is for educational purposes and to wake the people up, good, bad, or indifferent. We want to give you our good friend, The Mysteries of Egypt. Part 1. In all our lectures, you could go over Go through them, Dr. Lewis, Dr. Monderson, whoever we can get, trust, study them, learn, and when they come down here, you could come down here and talk to them. So give a great big hand to Dr. Fred Monderson.
Hey!
You want coffee?
Yeah, this is my brother. This is
I'll send it to her right now.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Andrew,
495
$2,900. $2,900.
2900. Okay, I'll send it to him right now.
He's waiting.
And what's his name?
Andrew. Last name, second.
And I want to thank my lovely wife, you can't see her face, for handling the camera. She runs the whole show for the Mackey's group.
She wears the pants in the family.
She wears the pants in the family, but and the only way you gotta meet her if you come down here and say hello to her. Three, 4, 7, 4, 9, 5,
2,900.
2900. I got it right here. That's,
Yeah, you say you didn't get it.
okay, I'm gonna send it again. Andrew, I'm sending it to you again. You good?
Good evening, family. It's wonderful to be here, to sit in the sacred seat, to present to this wonderful audience you those 0.5% that are on top of everything. On a note of correction to Brother Ray, who has presented that great body of work today. But in terms of the Sonny Carson issue, it was Gates Avenue, not Jefferson. I was at City Hall, City Council, when they voted. I wrote an article about the people who were there. I must have listed about 132 names in that piece for the Daily Challenge. Sure, the classic volume is called Sonny Carson, The Education of Sonny Carson. But you ought to know that I wrote 5 books on Sonny, entitled The Final Triumph, Sonny Carson, The Final Triumph. In fact, last year, and even here, Brother Ray has mentioned my final compilation of my work with Sonny, because I was the chairman of the Bones Committee. The Bones Committee that took Samuel Carson to Ghana. In fact, I mentioned Sonny and Samuel Carson this past Saturday at an affair that we had honoring veterans and so forth. So I've been there, done that. You know, Ruby D and Oscar and her husband. One activist died, and she was praising that gentleman. And she said, "You see that guy there? He's a real activist. We only play activists. There's a guy on TV, acts as last OG. The real last OG is looking at you. His name is Dr. Fred Monderson." Let's give him a hand for that. Thank you. There's a pastor in Georgia who likes to say, you have to go deep. That's where we go in this evening. My topic, Mystery in Egypt, Part 1. Let's go to the beginning, the primeval mound of this argument. Before there were temples, before there were pylons, before there were sanctuaries wrapped in 5 layers of cosmic protection, there was the African mind contemplating creation. In presentation essentially begins where Egypt begins. In the darkness of noon, in the first emergence of land, in the moment the Creator God stands upon the mount, in the birth of order from chaos, in the awakening of divine image, in the first ritual, in the first architecture, in the first memory. This is the intellectual ground this presentation rises from. The mystery we speak of began where the ancestors began. Not with the Greeks, not with the Romans, not with the modern distortions, but with the African architects of the sacred, those who raised stone from earth and made it speak. Let us begin with the truth that Egypt was not an accident of geography, but a deliberate intellectual project. A civilization built on mathematics, ritual, astronomy, and divine presence. Let us begin with the Creator God designing the first temple, the primeval sanctuary, the cosmic prototype from which all later temples descend. It began with African priests who preserved this knowledge through invasion, occupation, appropriation, and erasure, who kept the rituals alive, who maintained the architecture, who carried the cosmology forward, so that even in the Greco-Roman period, the temple still whispered the ancient African truth. Let us begin with the lineage of modern African scholars. Diop, Obenga, Clark, Carruthers, Ben Johanna, who restored what had been taken, who re-Africanized the Nile Valley, who insisted that the world remember what Africa created at the dawn of history. This is the mystery ancient and moderns lusted after. This is the mystery they knew of, did not really know of because it was only known to initiates. And even though they had an idea of what lay in the temple storehouses, in the twisted colonial imperial propaganda logic, they built the historical presentation and interpretation on an underlaid parapet of quicksand that Afrocentric scholarship is demolishing. Remember, Dr. John H. Clark pointed out, and you must remember this, Europe's claim to Egypt uses no logic. Remarkably, Dr. Clark analytically revealed the people who preach racism colonized history. And when Europe colonized the world, she colonized the world's knowledge. Nevertheless, all that notwithstanding, in order to investigate this issue, the interrogative hypothesis, which is there substantive evidence that omission and distortions, misstatements, and outright fabrication in ancient Egyptian studies have occurred, is very much appropriate. Such a position from a detached stance allows a fair inquiry into the intent and purpose for which this falsity has been and is being perpetuated, and objective scholarship has not effectively dealt with the problem. Because the purpose of overlooking such unscholarly writings with their untenable propositions under the glaring light of the living room is more sinister and pernicious than generally thought. A principal prognostication regarding the events surrounding this issue is the intent of denying a meaningful role of Africans in ancient Egyptian civilization. To wit, this has manifested as Afrocentrists have argued. The German scholar Hegel took Africans out of Egypt and Egypt out of Africa.
So you want coffee or tea?
Coffee. In ancient times, none. The term mysteries of Egypt had to do with the esoteric and philosophic drama of temple ritual, and all forms of knowledge developed, refined, and perpetuated, but most important, controlled by the priesthood. It is understandable that as man's consciousness developed in the emergence from the mists of antiquity, great bodies of knowledge were accumulated in the fields of Egyptian science, art, and technology. When we speak of STEM today, it's easy to understand, from the hand axe to medicine It all began in Africa. The Africans are the one who pioneered STEM, and this is what our young people need to know. However, access to this life-changing experience was restricted to organizational initiates. As this was and other forms of skills were handed down practically from father to son in both family and organizational framework. The latter organization framework practically and professionally was transmitted through the priesthood, a body of nobles, an organizational body of priests. This practice continued for more than 2,000 years. Then word leaked out about the wisdom of the Egyptians, and as a result, destructive invading hordes vented their wrath on Egypt, which the state had ceased to be able to provide to be an imperial power with the capability and capacity to defend the nation. On the other hand, in that early age of inquiry, visitors with an inquisitive bent came to Egypt in search of knowledge, wisdom, enlightenment, and adventure. Anything that would lift their consciousness about the ignorance of the countrymen at home. In the latter case, one of the earliest Greek visitors was Hecataeus of Abdera. Okay, thank you. No, thank you. Hecataeus of Abdera, who rightly called Egypt the gift of the Nile. Then Herodotus came nearly a century later and got credit for the statement. We know that Solon, Pythagoras, Plato, and Aristotle visited Egypt and enhanced their knowledge. Ivan van Sertima tells as George G.M. James, Chikante Diab, Teofilo Benga, Joseph Ben Hanan, and others equally affirm the names of Greek visitors to Egypt for adventure and schooling. All visited Egypt, learned new ideas, and got credit for formulating new theories that actually took Egyptians millennia, thousands of years, to develop through trial and error testing. Thus, the tradition of the esoteric nature of Egyptian knowledge helped color the concept of the mysteries of Egypt. That is to say, those to whom bits of knowledge were given were to not only claim elaborate and original authorship, but unintentionally spread the word about the mysteries of Egypt that would resonate down through the ages. For nearly 2,000 years, tales of the mysteries of Egypt and the exploit of Africans as benefactors of goodness, moral quality, religious and scientific innovation visible. Homer's long-lived Ethiopians, similar praises of other Greeks, all propelled Africa to almost godlike stature, simply because Egypt could be admired, not duplicated nor possessed. In modern times, the key to hieroglyphics lay in the egg, awaiting the great minds that would later decipher its secrets and unleash an avalanche of interest in ancient Egyptian Nile Valley antiquities and history. Naturally, much of this came about because of an accident of history. The war in Europe following the French Revolution forced Napoleon to retreat to Egypt to winter and to lick his wounds. He, however, like Alexander the Great, came as conqueror and stole Africa's knowledge, heritage, and legacy. The British followed him, and there was fought the Battle of the Nile, which incidentally happened in the Mediterranean. From these encounters, a number of subsequent developments took place that forever changed the face and landscape of ancient Egyptian history, perception, presentation, propagation, and interpretation. The first of these developments was French fascination with antiquity, as demonstrated by the savants, who were scholars, soldiers, who accompanied Napoleon to Egypt. They were fighting battle after battle, even as they investigated the art and architectural accomplishment of these earlier Africans, whose influences had far-reaching implications for medieval and early modern Europe, cultural and artistic development and history. The description of Egypt these wise men produced from research conducted between such battles remain a classic on Egypt 2 centuries later. No other work on ancient culture has done as extensive and comprehensive an assessment of this classic as this classic. Concomitant with this publication, Count Varney wrote Ruins of Empire that made some interesting revelations about Africans who, in around 1800 of our era, were enslaved in a horrible institution of slave trade and slavery. Equally, another Frenchman, Count Denon, was the first modern artist to paint a picture of the Sphinx of Giza in its intact form. He would later write that elements from Napoleon's artillery regiment shut off the nose and disfigured the face of the Sphinx because of its black African godlike facial features gazing into eternity. This may simply be because when Napoleon arrived at the Great Sphinx of Giza, he is reported to have said to his men, "Millennia of history look down upon you." More important, this African sentinel had remained intact throughout the glorious achievements of the old Middle and New Kingdoms, the late period, and beyond the Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Turks, etc. Perhaps they asked the Sphinx, and he told them much that he had seen from the Alpha to the Omega of their time. Or he did not reveal much, and that probably upset them. Then they reasoned, since, well, we begin to see when Napoleon was departing, his wife Josephine said to him, "If you go to Egypt, bring me a little obelisk." So an obelisk, which is, when we were at the Mailman March in '95, I've been at all marches. I'm the ace of spades. Don't question my blackness. I'm there. Dr. Bannon got on stage and said to the audience, they say 2 million, I was there. I made history twice a day because I was there, but I took a 19-volume work to the Library of Congress to register of letters that I wrote to O.J. Simpson when he was in prison. I was on Dr. McIntosh's bus, and there was a gentleman there. I've been trying to locate this guy. He had an accident, so half of one of his arms was missing. And when I decided to go to the Library of Congress, after we got into RFK Stadium, where at that time the Washington Redskins played, and then we walked from there to the Capitol building. I wrote an article for the Daily Challenge. As Maria mentioned, I wrote more than 1,000 pieces for the Daily Challenge. They never paid me a dime. I wrote this piece called Walking the East Capitol Mile, and I had my 2 bags. And on the bus I said, there were 2 women guiding me. And I thought, and their images were shown right here by Brother Trust. My mother, Sharice, my grandmother, Sharice Prevail, and my mother, Mita Monderson. And this is cosmic, philosophic, religious, metaphysical. But I ended up besides the Capitol building. And Brother Sid, I think that was his name, he picked up one of the bags with his half a hand, and he said, "I want to make history twice today." So he walked me over to the Library of Congress, and I said to the lady, I said, "I want to register this book." And I took out, she said, "Okay, put it on the desk." I took out a volume, and I started pulling out 19 volumes. And the woman called everybody, "Look at this." So that work represented one aspect of my work, much of which had appeared in the Daily Challenge. But nevertheless, let me say that everyone should know to change custom and tradition is a difficult task in the human experience. Many scholars ascribe the Sphinx of Giza to the Pharaoh Khafra, who built the second great pyramid at Giza in the Old Kingdom. He was a builder of the second great pyramid at Giza, erected during the 4th dynasty. Any cursory glance at the Sphinx will reveal its African facial features. Therefore, if we accept it's the likeness of Khafra, then it's easy to assign this king, his father Khufu, and his son Menkaure to the African race. Inasmuch Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop has argued, the formative years and foundations of Egyptian civilization, the pre-Diastatic and the Archaic periods being the basis for the Old Kingdom, were comprised of a people of African physiognomy. As such, this erudite research and articulated view as expressed in The African Origins of Civilization, Myth and Reality, 1974, Dr. Hawk wrote the forward to that, and Civilization or Barbarism, an Authentic Anthropology, 1992, debunks the Caucasian origins of Egyptian civilization. For Diop has shown the first significant influx of foreigners came with the Hyksos invaders after the fall of the Middle Kingdom, a much later development. If you've been following my work, and let me say this, okay? You're at a loss if you don't have any methods. I'm sure you are. Excuse me.
Could you do us a favor? Maybe one of these days in the future, make a list of the books that you
I'm on Amazon. Look up my name on Amazon. You see 60 books up there.
Just look up Monderson.
60.
Dr. Monderson.
Okay, and then I want to get you.
Okay.
Got a bunch of books, bro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he bringing them out now.
No, I want to show you why you gotta buy books, not sneakers, okay?
How about sneakers?
That's very good for you, sir.
Why to buy?
Well, now buy my books. Go.
To buy me,
When you leave here, run and get them. Okay, the point is that you have to have your library for your children and your grandchildren. Okay, you have to invest your money wisely. Okay, so this is Black Athena by Martin Bernal. Okay, when I was at Temple in '92, he was it was a hot topic. So he was attacked by Mary Lefkowitz and others, which was not out of Africa. So he wrote the second volume to Black Athena. Then he wrote again, Black Athena writes back. So I have in my possession these 4 books by this guy. Okay? The point is I'm trying to make is that you need to get off your wonderful cushions and run to the store and get my book, because everything I say is based on truth. Research truth. Dr. Ben said to me, and he was one of my mentors, Dr. Leonard James was my principal mentor, but I met Dr. Ben in '72. I'm the one who first started calling Dr. Ben. He said, Monderson, '72, at that time, I was still wet behind the ears. But I listened to what he said. Choose one country in Africa. There are 54. Choose one and become a specialist, not a generalist. I chose Egypt. I put all my weight, resources into Egypt. This century, 21st century, I've been there 17 times already. Forget about how I followed him into Egypt through the 80s and the 90s. Okay, so that's where my knowledge comes from that I tried to share with you. And I thank Brother Ray and I thank Dr. Lewis, who was in Egypt with us when Dr. Ben was first starting to bring our people to open the doors, to bring the light of knowledge to elevate, as he said, from this to this. Okay, so follow me because I'm trying to get someplace. Nevertheless, okay, other scholars such as John Anthony West have attributed an age of almost 10,000 years to the Sphinx, arguing that while evidence links the Sphinx to Khafra, remember, the second great pyramid at Giza, it's simply because he did repairs to the monument, and so inscribed his name to it, as many would do, affirming as they expropriated ownership of monuments and affixed their name to such structures. As an example, if we fast forward to the New Kingdom, Hatshepsut built the kiosk of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, dedicated to the Theban triad that rests in the Temple of Luxor in what is called the Ramesian front, that is the extension that Ramses II erected. This was certainly before Amenhotep, who built the great Luxor temple, and I have one book, I'm writing a second, and again, you want a conduit to the knowledge? Follow me. One guy in the festival said, I don't follow, I only follow my wife, but you say, follow me on your, but Amazon got the information. You serious? Good. Not tomorrow, tonight when we leave. Okay, so, this was certainly before Amenhotep built his temple there. This meant, positing, there must have been, certainly been the Middle Kingdom temple standing at Luxor when Senhut, the queen's architect, erected the kiosk. He would not have erected a kiosk if there wasn't a temple. So when Amenhotep III followed him as the eighth king of that dynasty, he erased that temple and erected his monumental testament in stone. The temple standing there, Amenhotep III tore down to erect his classic masterpiece with its famed processional colonnade. As the colonnade was unfinished, Tutankhamun completed its decoration and inscribed his name there. Later, Horemheb, Ramses I, and Seti I, and Ramses II did repairs and inscribed their names on the columns and architraves. Ramses II, in constructing what is called the Ramesian front, that's the frontal addition to the temple. In addition to the Temple of Luxor, repaired Hatshepsut's kiosk, which Thutmose III had expropriated, after which Ramses II equally inscribed his name on it. So for anyone not knowing this, history will ascribe the kiosk of Ramses II because his name is there. Elsewhere, at Karnak, the 8th pylon has a unique history. Queen Hatshepsut built this pylon. Thutmose III appropriated it, erected his name and inscribed his. Erased her name and inscribed his name. Later in the dynasty, during the Manu Revolution, Akhenaten, who was Amenhotep IV, Amenhotep III, and Queen Ti's son, erased the name and image of Amun, and there inserted that alongside the name of his god, the Aton. During the Ramesside restoration, that's after the overthrow of the Amana Revolution, then Seti I emerged, erased the name of Amenhotep's god, the Aton, and reinserted that of Amun, who was the original god of that temple. Therefore, the name being on a particular monument is simply not sufficient to ascribe ownership to that particular individual. And so, we must know the history behind the monument in person. I would add the story behind King Tut's ethnicity, which he was a black kid. Dr. Clark always said that King Tut was a minor king who got a major funeral. If you've been following Egypt for any length of time, they have been hiding the ball about King Tut's treasures. Today, there's a new museum. The museum, there is a wing for Tutankhamun, and it's open. So all the stuff that they were preventing, in the old museum, there's a room where the hall of Tutankhamun, you could take pictures of the jewelry. I was able to sneak in there and get my stuff, right? Like several other places where you can't go, but I've been going there and I built up my rapport with people, and but today I just came out of there in June, right? I visited that new museum twice last year and again this year. right? So the entire collection of his jewelry that's in the country is now on display in the new museum. You guys see it. And some of the stuff, I'm coming up with a new book on Dr. Ben by the end of the summer. And a lot of the images of the new museum will be in that book. And it's really, if I could share this with you, a number of the lectures that I did here in honor of Dr. Ben are comprised in that book. So, fate is sometimes rather strange, and perhaps it was the same artillery officers who shot at the Sphinx who probably made the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. This single piece of rock has had the most profound, far-reaching influence and implications in the history of human progress than any other inanimate object known to man. Guides in the Cairo Museum boast the institution has 120,000 authentic pieces and one imitation, the Rosetta Stone. That's because the original is in the British Museum. Like the Shabaka Stone is in the British Museum. They grab it and it's there. And
Where's the British Museum?
in London. In London.
Is it open to the public?
Yeah, but they hide in the ball. You know, only certain pieces are available. If we look at Chicago is the University of Chicago is the storehouse of Egyptian knowledge in this country, right? There's so much stuff in the basement, it boggles the imagination. There are graduate students who are doing masters and doctorates on the information down there. And why I say that is, okay, as an example, okay? Karl Lepsius, a German, went to Egypt in the 1840s. He collected 15,000 pieces and shipped it to Berlin. That became the basis of the Berlin Egyptological collection, right? Reason spent about 2 decades in Egypt. He shipped 400 boxes to the University of California. Okay, something that's going to be mentioned here. Okay, what's the size of the box? I don't know. But 400 boxes is a lot of boxes, and he has information for the entire duration of Egyptian history. So all of this stuff is out there, and we don't know about it. Okay, and that's why I insist that our people, you need to trust the real deal. You know, I mean, investigate and make your decisions, but don't fall for everything that you hear. You know, not everything, not all that glitters is gold. The people out there telling you, selling you roof tickets or follow Monderson. You get in the real deal. So, okay, where am I? So the Rosetta Stone in British Museum is a trilingual inscription comprised of hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek, inscribed on black basalt stone, in which Pharaoh Ptolemy Epiphanes I is praised by priests, Egyptian, for his tax concessions and assistance to the nation's temples during the 2nd century BC. Now, if you've been following us, I did lectures on the Greeks, Alexander, and all this stuff. As Brother Ray would say, it's all on YouTube on the Maki lecture series. Since the matter of ownership was settled in the aftermath of the Battle of the Nile and the stone came into British possession, British Museum ownership, facsimiles of the principal hieroglyphic and Greek languages were made and distributed among scholars in Europe. The third, or the Demotic, was dealt with later. Scholars Akbal, Young, Champollion made the most progress and by 1822 the latter, Champollion the Younger, announced to the world his success in deciphering hieroglyphics. However, because Champollion was a brilliant linguist, proficient in English, French, ancient Greek, and Coptic, his efforts were the most successful, and he got full credit for cracking the code of hieroglyphics. It's often commented on how proud and excited he was with his successes, that he endeavored to decipher every inscription he could get his hands on. He worked so feverishly that within 10 years, from 1822 to 1832, he dropped dead from exhaustion, yet having bequeathed the world his priceless accomplishment. All this notwithstanding, and whereas the world lauded Champollion for his cracking the code of hieroglyphs, not much attention has been paid to his writings and initial observations of the nature of the people of ancient Africa, ancient Egypt, and their neighbors. Importantly, he recognized the black African nature of ancient Egyptians and other Africans and the inferior position of the Caucasian neighbors. Chikante Diop in The African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality has a chapter entitled Recent Falsification of History, in which she examined and analyzed the original letters of Jean-Jacques Champollion to his older brother. The good doctor showed how the brother distorted Champollion's message as if his name is Jean-François Champollion, as if he was part of the cabal. The cabal was led by Hegel, and as Dr. Carruthers has said, Hegel took Africans out of Egypt and then took Egypt out of Africa, so now Egypt is in the Middle East. I mean, give me a break. Who had begun by 1830 and were forcefully propagating the false formation of Caucasian Egypt. From the first American and French Revolution produced an age of intellectual boldness that within a few decades, humanity's powers of reason expanded immensely. The idea of the encyclopedia came into being, and the French philosophers, the philosophers called philosophers, and the British and German counterparts created all manner of philosophical paradigms based on the teachings of the Greeks, Romans, medieval, and early modern philosophers whose intellectual foundations were omitted in claims of Greek influence in formation of European culture. This is what Martin Bernal deals with. He inadvertently comes up with the fact that the Egyptians were blacks, but this is not what he set out to do. He set out to find where the Jews were. And guess who he found? He found the black Egyptians. So, pardon me. Okay. Naturally, the Upper Nile and Central African connection became lost in the now recognized and propagated falsity, as represented in ascent of the Nile approach rather than descent of the river, even as an influence, the effluence and cultural manifestation followed the course of the water from Central Africa down towards the Mediterranean. And you have to understand, there are two forms of interpretation. One is the ascent of the river, which is against the natural order. The ascent has to do with how the Europeans climbed up river. And just like so many other places, for instance, distortions. Okay, the first cataract is located at Aswan, Egypt, which is Egypt's southern border. And as you go in Africa towards Central Africa, you have the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth cataract. And I have always reasoned, if you were the Nile God and you were setting out, go down the river, you would say to yourself, well, I would have named this the sixth cataract. I would name this the fifth cataract. I would name that the fourth. So everything is turned around because of European interpretation. Okay, I mean, we hear about the red and white crown. It's not the red and white crown of Egyptian kingship. It is the white crown resting on the red crown. Okay? Again, north, south, east, and west. It's not really. It's south-north. Okay, in ancient times, the Africans oriented themselves according to the river of their environment. So in Egypt, the river runs from south to north. In Mesopotamia, where Europe is located, the river runs from south to north. So the world interpretation of directional focus is as the European saw it. Remember now, especially during the age of colonialism, there was a concept called concentric. The farther you are, these are circles emanating from a location, a central location, a nucleus. So the farther you are from that central location, it was less, it was more civilized you were, or the farther you were less civilized. So what we get is that we get, as I said, north-south instead of south-north. We get red and white crowns. But in fact, it was the south that emanated everything, and therefore the king is always called King of Upper, represented by the white crown, and Lower Egypt. So how are you going to tell me about red and white, which has to be lower and upper, which is rather than upper and lower? And it's the same thing about, let's say, that you visited the Temple of Karnak. So I have another book on the Temple of Karnak. When you go in, you go to the first pylon, you go to the second pylon, the third pylon, fourth, fifth, sixth pylon, the seventh pylon, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. The first 6 pylon, by modern calculation, is located on the east-west axis, called the divine axis, where the God transits the heavens. And pylons 7, 8, 9, and 10 is on the north-south or south-north, north-south orientation. That's called the king's axis. So there are 2 axes, 2 principal axes: the east-west and north-south. Right? But that's not how the pylons were built. Okay, the first pylon built was actually the 4th pylon, the 4th and 5th pylon, that was built by Thutmose I. And the 8th pylon was built by his daughter, Ramses Hatshepsut. Then, her brother, nephew, or whatever you would call him, who was also a son of Thutmose I, he built the 6th pylon. Right? Then he built the 7th pylon. Now, as I said, she built the 8th. So now, at the end of that dynasty, the 18th dynasty, we go into the 19th dynasty. Then Ramses II, Ramses I, he builds, with Horemheb, he builds the 1st pylon. Then Ramses, he builds the 2nd pylon, sorry. He builds the 2nd. Amenhotep III, who built Luxor Temple, he built the 3rd pylon. All right. Now, the 8th pylon was built by Horemheb on the 9th pylon, today 9th and 10th. But then, what is today the 1st pylon was built by the Ethiopians. So all of this is confused based on the European orientation that is presented to us, and we cannot challenge it because we don't have the knowledge and understanding of the way things were and how they were packaged to us. Okay, so for example, Edward Neville was a Swiss Egyptologist. He cleared Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, 92 to 96. And then he came back and cleared Mentuhotep's from 1892 to 96, and from 1903 to 1906, he cleared Mentuhotep's, that is his temple, alongside that of Hatshepsut. Okay, so he's recognized. He did a translation of the Book of the Dead. But he argued that this African that was facing the south, which was Central or Inner Africa, represented the proper direction of the orientation. And Dr. Diop says no. Right? So if he's facing the south, now today when we face north, the east is to our right and west is to our left. So he is saying that this guy facing the south, that the west was on his right, which is not. The west should be on his left. So Dr. Diop says no, the man was facing where he originated, just as the Muslim today faces Mecca when he prays. So he corrected him. I mean, that's a part of this whole notion of the American Egyptologist James Henry Bested said that Naaman's unification was a second unification. There was no unification of the north by the south, of the south by the north. And this again, Dr. Diop had to dismantle and destroy that. Remember now, I mentioned here before that I was in Detroit with Dr. Lyndon Jeffries. We kicking it one Friday evening, and he said to me, he says, you know, we got to thank Dr. Diop for Dr. Diop. I said, what for? He said, Diop gave us Egypt because he broke up the whole conundrum that they had concocted and constructed around the true nature of who the Egyptians were. And I came here and I mentioned that. And I said, what are we doing to hold on to this? Because even you're given something, if you're not holding on to it, then you will lose it. And in this environment that we live today, they're grabbing everything. They're burning the books and whatever.
Right.
Honestly, I'm not writing for you guys. I mean, not you per se, I mean symbolically, right? Because you're buying my books. I'm writing for your grandchildren, not even your children, because your children buying sneakers. I was in this house one day. These people had 30 boxes of sneakers unopened.
The guy in my gym just brought a pair for $400.
There was a guy, I was at the printer on Atlantic Avenue near the post office. I was sitting there waiting, and the guy coming in from the back, and this fella came in with a box. So the lady said, okay, you got to take out that, open that box, take it out, put it on this box, so I get on this side, so I can put it in this box. So he takes it out, beautiful pair of sneakers. I said, wow, how much did that cost? He said, 600. I bought it on Amazon for 600, and I'm trying to sell it now on eBay for 400. In fact, here's the clincher. He said, in fact, I'm going to sell all my sneakers. And I'm saying to myself, wow, his foot looks good, but his head is empty. All right, his head is empty because there's nothing up there but sneakers. Imagine it, right? So the point is that when all this smoke blows over, I want my book there as legacy for your children. Because your grandchildren say, grandfather, what were you doing when Dr. Monderson was writing this book? Did you help him? Did you buy his book? Did you support what he's doing? Well, you know, I was trying out a pair of sneakers. Good luck with that. So, however, and effectively by 1880, because the European trade in African bondsmen was at its height, a new movement grounded in African exploitation, physical and natural resources, prejudice, racism, and white supremacy emerged to deny the role of Africans in Egypt in as much as colonial and imperialism ran rampant elsewhere in Africa. The philosopher, French, Baron Montesquieu has argued, let your actions become a universal law. But as science and investigation progressed, cracks emerged in the pillars of falsity upon which the foundations of Western intellectual and scientific culture had come to rest. The German philosopher William Hegel, during the early 19th century, was a founding proponent or standard bearer of this movement, and so stained the intellectual consciousness of European and even some Africans that the idea of a Caucasian Egypt began to take hold as part of the now emerging master race equally false notion. So powerful had this line of thought been espoused, even the masses of non-intellectual Europeans, emboldened and made proud by a white over black mentality, to this day trumpets this false notion. Proud of, this falsity existed and persisted, certainly cemented as a result of slave trade and slavery, and with imperialism as a precursor to colonialism, that nevertheless, side by side with the works and revelations of scholars such as Volney, Dinan, Godfrey Higgins, and much later, Jared Massey, Corsi Graves, William Medard, Albert Churchward, and even Patty and Graves, whose scholarship revealed the greatness and intellectual contributions of Africans in Egypt and the contradictions this posed for misrepresentation of the Egyptian culture. Or, as Dr. Leonard James consistently pointed out, the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. That is to say, what they're telling us is not what the monuments are telling us. Okay, there's a group, I don't want to call no names, but I think they had come out of Harlem, say, you can't read a white man. Sure, you got to read the white man because he did the work. But you have to learn, you have to develop intellectual autonomy. You have to read him and understand. You just can't read what's on the line. You got to read below the line, above the line, to the left and right of the line, and then make a considered judgment about what you're reading. But you got to learn how to read. Okay, and this is why you got to buy the books. All right, fill up your house with these things because they're gonna be around. And when you get older and you can't run around, you still got the sneakers.
And I've been to Monderson's house. Monderson got a bunch of books in his house, just like rest in peace, Mackey, Clark, all of them. They had books everywhere.
Thank you.
Monderson's house is full of stuff. Books.
Okay, so thus, all this prove and expose the falsity of European or Caucasian Egypt. Even more, so as Drs. Diop and Obenga, I follow these two guys all the time, powerfully exposed the falsity and cemented the true and correct black ethnicity of who were the ancient Egyptians. You know, I got another book called Who Were the Ancient Egyptians. There's so much of that stuff up on Amazon. I can't even stop to count. I just kind of keep going. You know, I never turn back. I just keep heading out. Hopefully, there will be enough stuff for the next generation, because that's my commitment today. Not to make money, because I ain't gonna get rich off of what I write.
Who were the ancient Egyptians? Is that what
Who were the ancient Egyptians? I mean, there's a whole slew of stuff. Go up there on Amazon, look for the book section, you know my name, put my name in there and see what comes up.
You can do that now if you got your cell phone.
Oh. And why are you doing that? Buy a couple. Start with who are the ancient Egyptians. Where the Canaanites. If you want to give your lady a beautiful piece of work, it's called Intrigue Through Time. Love, passion, jewelry, travel, all of that is in there. Mystery. Intrigue Through Time. I wrote that book in 3 weeks. I was down in the islands and my computer went down. I was so frustrated that I started writing this stuff. By the time to come home, it's 3 weeks I was done. But that's one of my best pieces of writing. So if you have a friend that you want to give a book to, give them Intrigue Through Time. Intrigue Through Time. It's only $20 for that. It's one of my cheapest books, but it's one of my greatest pieces. The decipherment of Egyptian set in motion a number of things that developed and created significant spin-off throughout the 19th century. The first of these was an enormous interest in the study on acquisition of the ancient monuments, particularly Africa's antiquity in general. This in turn had an equally enormous interest and impact on later archaeological excavations and rapid print of reports that fed the emerging readership of the penny press in such places as England and elsewhere on the continent of Europe. By the end of the 19th century, a whole slew of organizations, got lots of time, a whole slew of organizations, especially from England, including the Egypt Exploration Fund, founded by Amelia Edwards and Stanley Lane Poole, and the Egypt Research Account, spearheaded Nile Valley excavations that encouraged rapid publications of these reports on every conceivable site in Egypt. Much of this activity was matched by German, French, Swedish archaeological schools and interest, displaying and producing museum exhibitions and publication concerns. Turkish, Italian, Polish, and other national interests came later, but equally held their own in perpetuation of the created falsity of ethnicity through accurate reports, though accurate reports were made on monuments and other revelations. That is to say, if they came, they found this tip, they said, this is a cup, but let me tell you, it's not what you think it is. So how they presented the information is one thing, but the report on what they found was correct. We have said that. American institutions, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, Boston Museum of Fine Art, Philadelphia Free Museum, and schools at the University of Chicago, Harvard, California, sponsored Egyptian excavations to unearth the ancient knowledge and to, as an example, secure the beginnings of their collections. Each published a journal extolling the progress of their acquisition process, as well as issued reports on their fieldwork and other interesting discoveries and developments taking place at the time. Universities that did not sponsor expeditions subscribed and required books published on the subject of the ancient records of the, I call it the ancient records of the ancient records. That is to say, the bulk of the information that's been done on Egypt is from 1870 to 1930. That's the area that I specialize in. I got all of the information on that.
1870 to 1930?
Yeah, I call it the ancient records. So it's ancient for us, about the ancient, so it's ancient records of the ancient records.
Ancient record of the ancient records.
Right. How many of the books? So those schools that couldn't sponsor an exhibition bought the books that came off the press about what was being discovered. An elaborate financial generating apparatus developed to help underwrite excavation costs. Quid pro quo, you do for me, I do for you. Expectation developed wherein donors, particularly institutions and the wealthy that contributed finances, thereby purchases printed reports and books. That is to say, the people from, let's say, the Egypt Exploration Fund and Egyptian Research Account, they would inform these different institutions, well, we have a book coming out next week. They say, okay, give us a copy. So we get the fresh off-the-print copy. And that's how they accumulate in their library. We got to do the same thing. This way we got to spend our money on books. This is the only salvation of our children, because these young ladies, they don't know nothing about what we're talking about. But when they look up and they found their intellectual covered beard, they can say, Godfather, what were you doing? Have the right answer. So they were awarded artifactual pieces from the pick of the crop. So when we discover all of this stuff, we take out the best piece, send it to England, Germany, wherever. So the phenomenon that developed, as Brian Fagan described in his book, The Rape of the Nile, in 1975. This is one of the earliest books I read. I was so fascinated by what they were doing. began to unfold following discovery of the Rosetta Stone and Champollion's decipherment. And so interest in antiquities acquisition developed. In fact, it exploded. There were no governing rules, no rules governing antiquities export. That is to say, you got your stuff, however you got, steal, borrow, or beg, and then you ship it out from Egypt at this early time in the 19th century. And this artifactual removal creating what I call a culture in captivity, continued at different levels into the 21st century. This reminds me and is a sort of parallel. I was being chauffeured in Cairo to a place called Saqqara, which is the home of the Step Pyramid. My driver's name, I can never forget this guy. I can never forget, his name was Gala El Sawi. There are a great many cars in Cairo, and driving is a challenge. I once saw a row of 9 cars in a 4-lane space, right? 9 cars abreast in 4 lanes. I mean, 4 lanes, you got 4 lanes, you got 4 cars, right? So it's confusing. One vehicle came close to a collision, and as a driver myself, sitting on the right side. Okay, so he's driving on our side, I'm the passenger. I instinctively moved my feet to press the brakes. He noticed. I said, I'm a driver too. He replied, you drive where there are rules. There are no rules for driving in Cairo. In fact, another driver said to me, navigating the hustle, he said, when driving in Cairo, you need 3 things. You need good brakes, you need a good horn, and you need good luck. So the ringleaders of the rape of the Nile were Saul and Malzoni. Saul was an official of government. The strongman Mando archaeologist, Sergeant Major. His name was Major, but he was a Sergeant Major. So he said, if it's not tied down, I'll move it. So this is what they did. These antiquities hunters stole everything they could get their hands on, large and small, above ground. They weren't into the digging as yet. Digging will come closer to the end of the 19th century. For instance, there is this enormous statue of Ramses II. This guy, Belzoni, was bent on carrying this stone to England. He dragged it until he got to a place called Memphis. And he was like, so today now, they built a whole building around it, and it's called the Memphis Museum. But you can see, he got tired and he left it there. He wanted to put it on the boat and ship it to England or anywhere in Europe that he could sell it, because that's what they were doing, stealing and selling and so forth. Okay, some things were purchased from native Egyptian dealers who were beginning to realize there's money to be made in Egyptian antiquities. However, it was much later before these local Egyptians realized how much economic benefits were in the tourist industry, such as hotels, restaurants, transportation, visits to temples and tombs and museums, bazaars, developing Nile cruises, even balloon adventures and more. Of course, sandy beaches in the northern Mediterranean also attracted visitors to Egypt. I've never been there. That's for the money piece. I go to the temples and tombs, get my photographs, and get out of there. Everyone got into the act to secure antiquities and to sell antiquities to institutions, governments, and private collectors. And so it continued for more than a century as the rape of the Nile ensued, laying the foundation for the grand European museum collections, public and private, that will stun and entertain visitors to this day. As all this continued, the Egyptian authorities were finally able to impose some rules for antiquities collection and export. It is interesting how in 1881, with the discovery of the Deir el-Bahari cache, a collection discovered near the temple, Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari,
What was the name of that again, in 1881?
The discovery of the Deir el Bahari, DEIRELBAHARICACHE, a collection, enormous, of royal mummies of the 18th and 19th dynasty. These are great things that we now have. All right, there were robbery going on, so the priests go into the tombs and remove all kings' mummies and deposit in this place. And it is such an inconspicuous place that people passing back before them, and the invaders, the Syrians and the Assyrians and the Romans and the Greeks and all of them, if they had known about this, they would destroy those mummies. I mean, if you go to England, the most sacred place in England is where the English kings are buried. Right? Nobody's going to go in there and excavate and say, I mean, I must have been 76 or so. I was in England and I went into the Tower of London. You had to pay a fee just to see the crown jewels. And there's a guy there. I mean, you couldn't even. You get one glance like a real spy, and you move. I mean, you couldn't stand up and admire, right? Now they're going all over Africa, digging. I mean, of course, it's in the form of silence, but where is the sacredness of this ancient culture? Dr. Ben said, when you go into Egypt, dress properly. Don't leave no refuse in there. You go in there, some of these European visitors, I mean, you swear they're going to the beach. I mean, it's a little better than the bathing suit. Practically everything, and they're going into the sanctuary where only the king and the high priest enter, the most holy place. But they don't have that respect that we, especially the Black Americans, because some of us go prepared. It took me almost, I would say, from when I was first introduced to Dr. Ben, in 72, when I got named Barney, that's when I gave him his name. Before it was Barney Curtis Dunwoody. And there's a guy out there in California named Curtis Dunwoody, and if you ever see him, could you tell him that I've been looking for him for years? Curtis Dunwoody, Barney, and myself, we started calling Dr. Ben Joe. And then we used to sit at City Tech, you know, young students. And then I said, Curtis said, man, we got to find a name to call this guy to be more respectful. And we came up with the name Dr. Ben, because his name was so long, even Gilnova couldn't pronounce it. Ben, I cannot do that. So we started calling him Ben Joe. Then we say Ben Johanna. All right. So he said, you know, like I said before, when doing research, okay, I said, choose one country and specialize in it. Two, he said, when doing research in Egypt, get the oldest documents you could find and work from there. That's why I gave you 1870 to 1930 as the ancient records of the ancient records. And the third thing he said is publish or perish. Okay? Publish or perish. They can talk, these guys, they can tell you, could talk you to death, but they ain't publishing nothing. And you run it to them. You're not running to me. You're not buying my books. I don't care. I mean, you know, I'm not writing because I want to sell my books. I am writing to provide knowledge for my grandchildren and your grandchildren, so that when all the smoke is finished, all this dust is blown over, we would have records that is the truth about our ancient culture, our legacy, that our young people can grow from, and you know, stand up, like Brother Ray had said earlier, so that they can stand in defense and deliver.
Hey, Dr. Monderson.
Who's talking? Who's that?
That's me over here, Brother Walter.
Okay, what you want to ask him?
Hey, I want to make a statement, man, that paleopathology, what they're admitting now is that the people who later became known as the Greeks left northern Russia about 2500 BC. The people who later became known as the Romans left northern Russia about 2000 BC. The people who later became known as the Persians also left northern Russia about 2000 BC. That is somewhere from western Siberia to the Volga Valley. Van Sertima actually said that in the 80s, but nobody believed him.
Well, the fact of the matter is that even if they left, okay, well, why do people come to America today? For a better life. These people didn't bring anything, okay? They crossed the desert. They were desert whipped. They were hungry, they were thirsty, they were naked, practically. So to claim that they were the originators of the great thought that we began today's lecture with is falsity. I mean, but we are not dealing with it. Excuse me, sir. I got this presentation to make. A couple of speeches ago, I dealt with the Greeks and the Romans and how they interacted with the Egyptians when they came 3,000 years after the beginning of this enormous intellectual upsurge. Okay, so when I have some questions, as soon as I'm finished, I'll give you a chance. Okay, so. As Aldous Monderson told, a new voice could be heard crying in the wilderness about the destruction of ancient monuments in Asia and Africa, specifically Egypt. These antiquities who moved from Egypt were never gift wrapped by some clerk in a bazaar. These were the rascals, thieves, plunderers who stole these objects, such as statues, columns, stela, paintings, sarcophagi, and their lids, obelisks, jewelry, mummies, coffins, particularly used all manner of tools and strategies to uproot and remove these objects from their positions in situ or in sight. In the process, much damage was done to the monuments, according to Fred Gladstone Bratton in A History of Egyptian Archaeology, 1968, page 75. He said Richard Lepsius himself sent some 15,000 objects to Berlin. Including 3 tombs from Memphis, an obelisk, and a pillar from the tomb of Seti I at Abydos. Lepsius rationalized his own policy by the statement that only by rescuing the antiquities and sending them to a European museum could they be preserved from destruction. So, Lepsius shipped 15,000 to Berlin, and George Reisner sent 400 boxes to the University of California. In the case of Lepsius, Lorna Hope, listen to this now, Lorna Oakes, in her book Ancient Egypt, wrote, Lepsius did 15,000 molds or friezes, which is unabashedly false. It's like when you get, let's say this picture here of Brother Reyes, I get one of these art paper that you can see through, and I trace something. He didn't do that. These were actual artifacts he stole and sent to Germany. She is lying. So she's a part of the propagated falsity. And she's saying elsewhere, she don't write. She said, we write for a European audience. So she's not concerned about you. I mean, you have it like, I heard some years ago some guy saying that was making one of these fancy champagnes. He says, I'm not making my champagne for black people. So guess what? The blacks started buying the champagne. Right? So we got to be careful about how we read the books. And we have to develop the capacity to read between the lines, above the lines, below the lines, to the right hand side, and left and right, and then come up with your own interpretation. One of the things Dr. Lewis always says, my job is to present information. It's for you to decide how to use it, to examine what I say, and then test it and see if it works. Lorna, L-O-R-N-A, Oakes, O-A-K-E-S, O-A-K-E-S, Oakes, like the big tall tree.
Okay, thank you.
So, this is not surprising given she also wrote, we write for a European audience. this even more important, despite their good works in excavation and clearance of the monument, European excavators, listen to this, archaeologists, anthropologists, artists, adventurers, linguists, these very likely were fully conscious. They were promoting colonialism and imperialist speak. Right? So these scholars were really representing their government, who was saying that the Africans are inferior, but their mineral and other resources are excellent. You know, the whole notion about superiority, inferiority, I don't think I mentioned this again and again. You know, what Martin Bernal did show is that from the 15th to the 18th century, as the Europeans were beginning to become aware of their cultural uniformity, they rejected Egypt and they promoted the Greek miracle. But this guy named George Sarton, S-A-R-T-O-N, he said that the Greek miracle was actually an African, an Egyptian do-over. D-O. So you can write this down, because I know you take copious notes. The Greek miracle, and you can put that in quotation, Greek miracle was actually an Egyptian do-over. D-O-O-V-E-R. So you can put that also in quotation. So they so these people were aware that what they were writing, what they were promoting was really false, but they dressed it up. You probably remember Sarah Palin when she said, "Lipstick on a pig is still a pig." Well, that's what was happening. But it took us this long to become aware that this is what they were selling us as a book of sale, something of sale there. But Dr. Diop crushed all of that and exposed them. You know, I often remember there was a magazine on archaeology about the British archaeologists. These little men run around the Sphinx with trowels, cement trowels, and they were covering up the Sphinx in their cement. That's what the cover page looked like. But they didn't finish the job. You could still see below what they had erected, you know, the cement. You see the black part of the Sphinx was still visible. So they didn't get to finish the job. So this is what we need to be aware of. Okay. And one of the things, how we get there? We get there by reading and having possession of some of the works, as you saw, that he has consistently done. Brother Ray shows you where the information is. It's up to you to go and find it. It's not going to, this guy used to say, one of the pitchmen for E.F. Hutton. Some of you are too young to remember that. He says, he's not going to come and slap you on the bottom and say, "We are here." No, you got to go out there and spend time in the library or buy the books. Okay? Do a public library. They had a hustle going. A scam, if you will. People would come. Okay, there's a lot of visitors come and go to the library because the library is fantastic. Right? What are they going there for? A lot of them were going there to get the library card, register to get a card, until finally they moved it away. They're just coming here. But the fact of the matter, I see there are a few black researchers in the reading room, but there's no teacher. My principal used to say the kids need to trip, right? Especially like say at the end of May, and before you enter into June when there's nothing to be done, take them to that library. Okay, I see where these people got, I think, 10 floors of books of 42nd Street that you need to investigate so that you can be armed. You don't go out there defenseless and hope to defend yourself. Or even to stand as equal among others, because you're supposed to be an empty vessel. Okay. And that ain't no fly. Okay, as research has shown, in ancient times, temples were destroyed in two different ways, other than by some natural disaster as an earthquake, as in the case of Amenhotep III's mortuary temple on the west bank at Luxor. In the first instance, such an event has occurred where the internecine struggles between the adherents of rival deities and theologies who attack each other's temple out of spite, or invading forces whose initial intent to target was the state's principal god's temple that they erect before retreating. A good example of the first is the conflict unleashed in the Amarna Revolution, when Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten's god, the Atan, decreed the name of his rival Amun should be erased and his temple attacked. I mentioned him a little earlier. When the Atan was overthrown in turn by Amun's people, they attacked and destroyed Aten's temple, his city, and his name where it could be found. In addition, and equally too, invading forces as far as the Hyksos, who came after the Middle Kingdom, wreaked much destruction of temples and other infrastructure before they settled down to live in Egypt amidst the destruction they had unleashed. It's no wonder these invaders were expelled by the 17th and 18th dynasty kings who later founded the New Kingdom glory days or Golden Age of Egypt. As such, with their efforts expended in the 50-year war of expulsion, Egypt became a military and imperial power. In similar fashion, destruction of temples, the Assyrians and Persians destroyed much, hauled away a great deal, and left a bad taste in Egypt. Many temples were destroyed by them. Principal Karnak and Luxor, home of the Theban empire god Amun-Ra. One could well imagine their march through Egypt as a spreading of locust mentality as they scorched the earth from Delta to Luxor and back to the Delta. If the actions of Karnak or Luxor were such, one could well imagine the wake of destruction they left in their path up and down the Nile in their invasion and retreat to rule from the north. Conversely, when the Ethiopians invaded Egypt and founded the 25th dynasty, they respected the culture belonging, according to Pianke, to the ancestors. The Egyptians built and repaired structures, brought stability and prosperity to Egypt, and defended her against foreign hordes. Alas, they were pushed back into Nubia or Ethiopia when the hordes returned, reinforced with their evil intent to wreak further destruction. In their retreat, the Ethiopians did not destroy. To the Greeks and Romans equally can be attached the label or term appreciative conquerors. First, the Greeks were amazed at the color of the Egyptians, as well as high-level intellectual, religious, scientific, art and architectural, even medical knowledge and social, philosophic and ethical standards these Egyptian Africans had attained. The Greeks employed a two-pronged strategy of oppressing the people, yet paying lip service to the religious establishment, the priesthood, which played a significant role in the culture. Greek rulers who became pharaohs of Egypt started and completed temples and also repaired structures throughout the land in their effort to placating the priesthood. Surviving temples are at Edfu, Kamamba, Esna, and Philae. Among others, they were considered Greek temples. However, while the Greeks built the later temples, it was the Romans who added the decorations. So the Greeks built the temples, but the Romans decorated them. Significantly, as Egyptian Africans brought light and civility to an ancient world, coming into civility and human consciousness, Greek travelers and scholars visited Egypt in search of adventure and knowledge, of which they would later write volumes. Some gave credit for the sources of their knowledge, while others did not. Some of these granted access to mystery training, refused to divulge what they were taught. Others wrote claiming originality of the knowledge. Knowledge for the Egyptian was a mental thing and not about writing and publishing, so that the uninitiated or even by the initiated, knowledge was in the head and in the physical practice. Many gave credit for the sources, the Greeks, Romans, of their knowledge, while others did not. Noting nearing the end of the 20th century of our era, as critical Afrocentric scholarship developed and the truth about ancient Greece and Africa unfolded, the many names of Greek visitors and philosophers who studied in Egypt became known, revealing suppressed omissions, which aided in resultant distortion about the interaction and reality of the ancient African experience. The second type of temple destruction occurred in a more orderly manner. When a pharaoh wanted to build a temple, he generally chose a site already circularized. So if I'm going to build, I'm not going to build over there, I'm going to build here because these people already built here, they've made their do here, and this site is already sacred, so I'm going to build here. And if there's a building here, I'm going to move it to their building. It already circularized by existing older temples, so he systematically and orderly dismantled the older structures to make way for the new one. Oftentimes, bricks or stone from the older temples would be reused as foundation fill for walls, beds of colonnades, and as fill for pylons. Nevertheless, it was the Egyptians who willingly and in an orderly manner dismantled or destroyed their temples. By mid-19th century, intellectual assault in Egypt had begun to pick up steam, as the museums of Europe and other academic institutions could now boast of having extensive collections. A sort of possession is 9/10 of the law mentality emerged. This sort of cart before the horse syndrome, in essence, supported the articulated view. Since we Europeans have all these institutions, then naturally the ancient Egyptians were Caucasian. Naturally, this did not go well with the visual images of the monuments and other data as manifested in the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. So the linguistic argument was put forward. As such, a whole slew of arguments emerged proposing the origins of the Egyptians as being from Southwest Asia. And as a result, distortion and omission became the order of the day. The claim that ancient Egyptian is a Semitic, Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic language was reinforced through several routes in which the Caucasian Indo-European was taught to enter Egypt. Nevertheless, to this day, existential data still contradicts the symbolic representation of the portrayal of Egypt that remained persistent. So Wallace Budge, in his 1922 volume Egyptian Dictionary, reversing his prior position, insisted Egyptian was an African and not a European or Asiatic language. Continuing, and even today, as is reinforced, the racists mount a bald-faced false claim that Egyptians were Caucasian. The argument shifted from being Indo-European to more particular Caucasian or Caucasoid or to Caucasian. As for example, Caucasoid to Caucasian. As for example, the Cairo music contains the Mahakra papyrus, number 142, which shows a very dark individual having black hair. This is one of the few times that you see black hair on display. Actually, there was one in that Barikach, where the big afro was showing that these people had this type of hair. And one of the commentators, how they would twist, the English commentator, how they would twist the information. He said, well, you know, in English law, they wear these kind of wigs, so it was still, they had nothing to do with the Egyptians' law. Okay, this is their royal hair or whatever. So when Mahapa had black, what I call black hair, in many instances, and it shows that this dark individual stands before a black Osiris. In many instances, Osiris is shown on papyrus as being black or even green as a symbol of fertility. Osiris is often and equally depicted and referred to as the Great Black. We must remember, as Emil Durkheim pointed out, green, black, blue, green, blue, brown were all variants of black. Min's image, different thing altogether. Min's image in the Luxor Museum is of a black-faced god. You couldn't take pictures in the Luxor Museum. Luxor Museum has images. It has images that were discovered in Luxor, in the temples of Luxor. So if you enter there will be people walking beside you, guards. I mean, that's what they did to stop me from taking pictures. But I had cultivated this relationship with this lady. She was the curator, Dr. Sanam. She let me take this one picture of this guy, Min, in blackface, who was the principal god Amun-Ra during the time of Thutmose III, the great imperial conqueror of the 18th dynasty. One image I was able to bring out of there was of men in blackface. Mahepo, he was a child of the nursery in the age of Amenhotep II, and he was the son of Thutmose III. Are you following me on this? Okay. Significantly, the note cards attached to the display done by the great Gaston Maspero indicated that the tomb of Mahepo was discovered by Laureate in 1899 at Thebes. He was described as the fan bearer and child of the nursery Mahepo of the 18th dynasty during the reign of Amenhotep II, the son of Thutmose III. The card read, Mahepo may have been the son of Thutmose III and a negress, so the kings were dabbling with to help the black beauty. Even for a detailed examination of his mummy, which showed that he died at about age 20 years of age, also showed that he was Negroid, but not actually a Negro. This type of information is publicly evident. How interesting, Caucasian to Caucasian.
Negroid, but not a Negro.
He was Negroid, but not, I'm coming to that. He was Negroid,
but not.
No, this guy is spinning this data to confuse you. So he is saying he was Negroid, but he wasn't a Negro. Listen to me carefully. So I'm saying Caucasoid to Caucasian, but Negroid, not Negro. It can here be pointed out that the word Negro was a 16th century AD invention by the Spanish, and therefore any translation of ancient text that inserts the name Negro in modern times is suspect. Let's face it, the name Negro, according to the book, the word Negro is evil intent and use. It's a racist term. In some modern translations, the Egyptian kings are made to say vile things about Negroes of Nubia. Dr. Ben Carruthers had argued these modern translators have put racist rhetoric in the minds and mouths of the ancient kings who never knew such things. In Dr. Diop's realization, here we are now, here it is. The racists created, according to Diop, the racists created the notion of the true Negro, which means that all the other Negroes are false. So you're just a false Negro. You're not, say, if you're not a true Negro, you're not pure. Diop was master of that.
So they manipulated the term.
Of course, like they do everything else. You gotta learn how to unravel and find a needle in a haystack. Another example can be made as part of the distortion and omission repertoire argument in the falsification of ancient Egyptian history. The famous American Egyptologist James Henry Breasted out of Chicago University produced a classic Ancient Records of Egypt in 5 volumes between 1905 and 1907 by the University of Chicago. In another 1960 work he wrote, the ancient Egyptian was a tall, thin, brown-skinned individual, which was changed when he began discussing the great white race. Now, it is said that Nelson Rockefeller gave him money to found Chicago House in Luxor to do epigraphic descriptions of the monuments. And so he stopped there talking about the brown Egyptian, which brown is black, to start talking about the great white race. So, one of Van Sertman's books got this in there. You gotta get that. You know, Van Sertman wrote a dozen volumes after they came for Columbus. They can't be found.
After they did what?
They can't be, a dozen volumes of monograms, they can't be found. Cannot be found. Right? But you know what that man said? The lost books are not lost, I got them right here. The lost books in the Bible, they're not lost, I got it. You know, there's a term, the lost books in the Bible. So he's saying, they're not lost, they're right here. Yeah, everyone knows the distortion of pick of the crop means you choose the best in any lot, particularly if you intend to display it to the public with the intent of conveying a message, albeit practically everyone is familiar with the idea of the white man's word. During the slave trade perpetrated by Europeans on Africans from 1441 to the 1880s, European behavior is described as naked imperialism. With the abolition of slave trade and the second coming of Europe to Africa, the tactic changed to enlightened imperialism. So they were now coming to Africa to uplift the African. This meant Africans were required, in order to be uplifted, they were required to pay the Europeans in land, raw materials, and mineral resources for rescuing them from bringing the light of Christianity and civilization to Africa. First and foremost, Christianity was not brought to Africa, as the African origin of Christianity is demonstrated by Gerald Massey, Ben Johanna, and John Jackson. The Immaculate Conception had its origins at Abydos, where this is clear in Second One's mortuary temple to god Osiris. Given this location can be considered the world's earliest site of pilgrimage. The death and resurrection of the Savior is as old as the time when God Osiris ruled Egypt. Osiris was a good king of divine origin who taught his people love, compassion, and industry. Out of jealousy, his evil brother Seth and his cohorts beguiled, entrapped, and killed and mutilated Osiris. His faithful wife Isis and sister Nephthys, the two Marys, with the help of divine messengers, taught Anubis, reconstituted and resurrected the God who became the judge of the dead and ruler of the underworld or afterlife. This belief in the salvation promised for the faithful permeated Egyptian civilization for the millennia of its existence, so thousands of years. Because of the potency of the Osiris belief systems, while the Egyptians, the first people to emerge from the mist of antiquity with a true sense of religious and divine spiritual consciousness, had many gods whose fortunes rose and fell, yet the Osiris cult remained consistent throughout. Let us not confuse the issue, for the one god Amun-Ra, Ptah, or even Amun, was the principal divinity in time perspective. That is to say, Ptah and Ra was of the old kingdom, Amun was of the new kingdom. That is, none of these had a connection to the afterlife such as Osiris did. Well, perhaps Ra, who in his circuit of the heavens and underworld met Osiris for a short period before he emerges again on the other side of the world to begin his day at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And that red ball you see in the sun in the distance, that is said to be the afterbirth of the goddess Nut, who gave birth to the sun in the morning. His handlers, among them Horus and Anubis, they do the early morning ritual, slap him on his bottom and say, go ahead and sail across the heavens. I've argued that the daily ritual, which is performed for the resident deity, the manifestation of the heavenly force in the temple, was in some way of a dual nature. That is to say that what they were doing down here was practical, but the idea of the god having breakfast up there, that is sort of like, it's mythical, philosophic, if you will, spiritual, but it had its reality here. So when the priest did the ritual in the morning, he was getting 2 meals for the purpose for one. So they were doing it here for him here, but his earthly emanation was getting the same meal. The only question is, okay, so the god down here got fed 3 times a day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Right? So he gets lunch around midday. Midday now, his heavenly manifestation is right there in the middle of the sky. So I'm saying, I don't know if he actually stops to have lunch or he just continues sailing across, so that when this guy is eating down here, the priests have a way of spiritually transposing the midday lunch to a heavenly force transiting over. And then when he gets to that side, the goddess Nut, who gives birth to him in the morning, swallows him up. He goes through her body, and then he comes back up at dawn the next morning. It's fascinating. But you have to spend time investigating this so that you can get the knowledge of all that it represents. It's not just what I'm saying here. Remember now, we're dealing with 5,000 years of history compressed in a 2-hour lecture.
And what is that cycle called? When you giving birth and doing it again?
Nut, N-U-I-T, is the goddess of heaven.
But what is that cycle called that you just explained?
That is the cycle of the sun. So the sun is born in the morning, he traverses the heavens, then he traverses the underground or the underworld, where he meets Osiris. Because Osiris is the ruler of the dead in the afterlife, underground. And then he has to pass through Osiris's kingdom to emerge on the other side, in the eastern portion of the sky, where the gods are born, that area of purity. Then, after he gets up, his band attendants, Horus and Anubis, they provide his tub of water. Then they have to check to see if the water is too hot or it's too cold. And then he gets his bath, they towel him, powder him, and this and that, dress him, and fed him, and say, okay, now go and sail. All this is happening, right? But it's the African mind. Remember how we started? I don't know if you were here in the beginning, like how when everything began, everything didn't begin with the Greeks and Romans. It began with the Africans who created the intellectual capacity to originate such an idea of creation, and so forth. And I've got a summary. If I can get to the end of this, I've got a summary of what today's lecture is all about. And I still got a lot of time, but I started late. Okay. So So, we see an emergence in Egypt specifically. Intellectual imperialism took the form of a quid pro quo in the method of occupancy. So we got naked imperialism when the Europeans began selling the Africans in the slave trade. We have enlightened imperialism when they came as colonial imperialists, and then we have intellectual imperialism when they seized the intellectual knowledge of the Africans that were buried and go back to ancient times. This new form of historical inquiry complemented linguistic studies well underway for decades. Significant archaeological excavation was undertaken from 1870 onwards to Egypt by the Egypt Exploration Fund, the British School in Egypt, the British School in Athens, and the French, Italians, Germans, Americans, and their representatives in the recovery, analysis, and presentation of the ancient knowledge. The work of the British in Egypt was particularly interesting for one man, Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, who spearheaded the approach and brought along an untold number of colleagues and their wives who produced a super-abundant body of work credited to the above groups. As excavation followed excavation, rapid publication reports fueled a development frenzy for knowledge of antiquity as well as knowledge of and possession of artifacts of antiquity to hold and admire. As this beehive of intellectual activity unfolded, great effort was made to cement the notion of the Caucasian Egypt falsity. The years 1870 to 1930 can be considered the golden age of British, European, and American archaeology in Egypt. As I said, I call it the age of ancient records of the ancient records. Concessions to excavate were given freely since Egypt was under British administration. Because a Frenchman, Champollion, had cracked the code of hieroglyphic, the tacit traditional acceptance held that top antiquities position in Egypt should be held by a Frenchman. Rightly so, the French have maintained a distinguished tradition in Egypt from Champollion through Mariette, Shabazz, Maspero, Lagrange, Chevier, etc. While exceedingly early, Mariette labored to excavate innumerable sites and establish a museum to house the recovered artifacts, while Maspero twice emerged as antiquities head. Even more, he discovered and translated the pyramid text, then became a most prolific writer. He had 150 volumes in the New York Library, and an authority on ancient Egypt, even though some of his scholars were questionable. Remember now, he's the guy who said Maspero was Negro but not Negro. But you got to read it, but read between the lines. Maspero collaborated well with the British administrator Lord Cromer, and this aided requests for British and French concessions to excavate. You just couldn't go there. The government had to give you permission to excavate in this area, and they set up boundaries of which you could work. So all of that had to be worked out. But they had an ace in the hole, which was the British administrator of Egypt. Given rights to dig, in addition, private individuals applied. Well, some people went and bought a little boat and sailed up and down the Nile and visited places, and then they wrote reports in the newspapers. But those reports never got the official treatment as they would be included in books. So that information is lost somewhere unless you have a resolute researcher who will go in there and ferret out this knowledge and bring it to light and let you see. And then you say, what? I didn't know that. Of course, because you're an armchair person who seeks knowledge. So, like I said, Maspero was part of the group that discovered the pyramid text, but he was sufficiently knowledgeable to translate it first into French, and then retranslated into other languages. Maspero collaborated well, I said that. Giving organization rights to dig in addition, private, okay, I said that. Okay, so the books were published by, especially memoirs, reports, the Egypt Exploration Fund. A couple of my books, I have a list of all the entities that were publishing publishing that same information that I told you from 1870 to 1910. So I can't tell you which one right now. Could have been Egypt Essays of an Ancient Pyramid or some other stuff, but it's all there. Buy all 6 books on Amazon, and then you become a true Monderson reader, listener, devourer of credible research. Because I have the information, and I'm trying to get it to you. But you know the whole story. You can take the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. However, Brother Kubia said, if you work that beast, you're going to get tired, and you're going to want to drink. So I'm hoping that you will get tired and thirsty and you want to drink. But the knowledge is there. Go after it. Invest your money. Dr. Mack is one of the greatest at raising money. Like Jesse Jackson was, raised money for Sharpton. But Dr. Mack said, I don't want to rent money. I only want, what was the brother's name that died recently? Bob Law. Bob Law said, I only want your fries and burger money. Right? So Dr. Mack was saying, don't give me your rent money, just give me your fries and burgers money. But, get the material. Hold on to it. Okay, so oftentimes the observations of the private individuals, though published in magazines, journals, or newspapers, never made into the more established published works. As such, then, these important tidbits are now lost from history, and only the most resolute research inquiry could ferret out these gems that are caveats to the racist juggernaut seeking to clean Egypt as Caucasian as opposed to being African, even though Egypt is located on the African continent. This is why, in researching and viewing ancient Egypt, Dr. Ben Johannan recommended find the earliest material available and work from there. This advice may well be useful because modern big books are so sanitized they have followed Hegel's purposely orchestrated strategy of removing Egypt from Africa and Africans from Egypt, or triumph of the false. Africa is not a part of Egypt. Egypt is not a part of Africa. So we're getting there. After the ruthless methods of antiquities acquisition in the age of enlightened imperialism, the cost to Egypt for systematic and scientific excavation became the right to pick some of the best pieces from recovered artifacts. Granted, much was recovered in excavation, but when one views the displays mounted at museums throughout the world in Britain, France, Spain, Italy, Turkey, Australia, America, all with multiple cities housing Egyptian collection, one gets the idea of the great volume of culture in captivity generated in intellectual imperialism mode of operation. Let's not forget, Lord Carnarvon's collection was extensive and exclusive as published when it was sold to the Metropolitan Museum of New York with a price tag of hundreds of millions of dollars. One guy, Lord Carnarvon, he's the guy that underwrote King Howard Carter, who discovered King Tut's tomb. And when he died, his family sold his collection, prize, to the Metropolitan Museum for hundreds of millions. Not just one person. You go figure. Do the math. Now, multiply this by the other possibly hundreds, if not thousands of private collections, particularly and even those of the thousands of excavators who brought home their choice of the pick of the crop. You know, somebody put something in their pocket, or they ship whatever. Fact is, then we have only the best pieces were chosen for display in European public collection, and with the suggestive nature of interior decoration enhanced by lighting, Caucasian Egypt has been achieved, or so many think. However, it's sad that the general European and American public could be so misled by their own writers, scholars, people, that all they know is based on a false foundation. This is not surprising, since the donation of Constantine, a cornerstone of Christian religious and spiritual architecture, a forgery, remained undetected for nearly 6 centuries. This guy from Iowa asked me, well, how is that possible? Well, what has happened, some of you can remember, there was a commercial, I think even when Dukakis was for president, it says, where's the beef? Remember the lady, where's the beef?
Oh yeah.
So you find a document in 1920 that has the phrase, where's the beef? It's a forgery because where's the beef was not invented yet. So the linguists found some words that were not coined as yet in the donation of Constantine 6 years later. So how was it in the document in the 4th century BC, the 4th century AD, and it wasn't born yet until the 6th or 7th century? So that's how they determined that the donation of Constantine was a forgery. And what is the donation of Constantine? It said the Roman Emperor Constantine had, before there was a significant battle the next day, and the night before he had a dream, and he saw the paraphernalia be associated with the bishop, with his coat and his mitre and some of his paraphernalia that he holds over, and he said, hey man, you know, and this is a time when the Romans were decimating the early Christian. He said, let's stop, let's give him a chance. So when he won the battle, he thought that the dream was an inspiration from divine forces to give Christianity a legal footing. And in doing that, he bequeathed to the papacy a set of land that's today called the Vatican. Well, you know, 600, 700, 800 years later, so what? We have the Vatican, so don't worry about that. It's like they say when Hollywood, when politics become Hollywood and Hollywood become. There was a guy who ran for president. His name was Thompson. You remember him, Thompson? He was a senator, I think, or something like that. But he was an actor. So you had
Ronald Reagan.
No. It was in that movie called The Search for Red October, all right, with Sean Connery. He was one of these naval commanders, but he was an actor who became a politician, and then from the politician went back. So we have the same thing. So you're saying so the donation was a false. We got the papacy, so forget about it. So we got to be careful about how the information is presented and how we accept it. So in essence, then, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of my presentation. However, don't leave the house yet. I want to give you...
Somebody had a question, Walter.
Yeah, but let me give you a summary of my presentation, okay? So, of course, you know that my topic is Mystery in Egypt, Part 1, and I hope that Part 2, if Brother Ray invites me back, he always says he would, but you can never tell. You know. Sometimes I say something and you don't like it, you say, nah, no more Monderson. But I'll be here, don't worry about it. So, I'm going to give you what I consider to be 15 points that I made in this summary. 1. Egypt, being in Africa, intellectually, spiritually, and cosmologically. 2. Egypt was a deliberate intellectual project. 3. African priests preserved the knowledge even through invasion. 4. Modern African scholars restored the truth. And we can cite Diab, Obenga, Clark, Carruthers, Ben Johanna, who re-Africanized the Nile Valley, who insisted that the world remember what Africa created at the dawn of history. 5. Europe distorted Egypt's history. And I quote Dr. Clark claimed that Europe's claim to Egypt uses no logic, because that's why the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. What they're telling us is not that. There's no logic into what we're seeing with our own eyes. As who was it said that Dr. Jack Feldman, believe me or your lying eyes. So Dr. Clark said that they use no logic in claiming Egypt. Omissions and distortions, fabrications were deliberate. It was a strategy to deny African agencies. And as I quoted Hegel, taking Africans out of Egypt and Egypt out of Africa. The mystery of Egypt was real and African. That's number 6. The mystery referred to esoteric temple knowledge guarded by the priesthood for millennia. Greek visitors, Solon, Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, learned from Egypt and carried fragments home. 7. Egypt's achievements were admired but never duplicated. Homer mentions the long-lived Ethiopians, men of great fortitude, tenacity, and humility and honesty. Greek art of Egyptian science, ethics, architecture, and ritual. 8. Napoleon, colonialism, and the depth of African heritage, and Dinan and the Sphinx, and the explosion of European antiquities chief. Remember, Dinan was the one who drew the Sphinx, and he said that Napoleon's artillery defaced the face. 9. The Sphinx and African ethnicity of the Egyptian. The Sphinx's features reveal its African origin. I cite the research showing the Old Kingdom population was African with foreign influx only after the Middle Kingdom. The Rosetta Stone and Champollion's deciphered hieroglyphics recognized the Egyptians as black Africans, but his brother distorted his writing to fit European racial ideology. European museums built on stolen African culture, evidencing the rape of the Nile, the removal of thousands of artifacts, and the creation of a culture in captivity. As Fred Gladstone Bratton states in his 1968 A History of Egyptian Archaeology, Leipzig sent home 15,000 objects to Berlin. And another work done in, I think, 1905 or whatever, that Reasoner sent to California, University of California, 400 boxes. Temple destruction could be compared with how foreigners, invaders, randomly just destroyed everything, as opposed to the orderly dismantling of the temple so that a pharaoh could rebuild on that sacred spot. So those who invaded were the Persians, the Syrians, the Hyksos. They dismantled temples, but the Egyptians systematically rebuilt, dismantled theirs and rebuilt on that site. 13. The rise of racist Egyptology. European scholars used possession of artifacts to claim Egypt as Caucasian, while its broad reversal acknowledging Egypt as an African language. 14. Iconography proves African identity in that the Mahapra papyrus shows a very dark individual before a black Osiris, the great black, that Maspero said was Negro, but not Negro. And Dr. Diop said, well, the Europeans created a whole notion of the true Negro, which makes all of us other Negroes, false Negroes. So true and false. And finally, Christianity's African roots. The Europeans didn't bring Christianity to Africa. Christianity has African origins. I think your stuff is not working over here, buddy. Anyway, I'm finished. So Christianity has African roots, and Abydos, Osiris, Ethiopia, and the Africans upheld Christian ethics long before Europe. So in essence, ladies and gentlemen, there you have my presentation and my summary. I don't know about if you have any questions, I will take your questions now. I have to, okay.
Is that going?
Yeah, in a reduced size.
Hold.
Okay. And then you could ask them if they have any questions.
And then I have.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to ask a question for Dr. Monderson, go ahead.
Good job, bro.
Thank you. I want you to stay tuned. There's a lot of new stuff coming out. Again, the lady may say, I read for European audience, I read for the African audience. And if others want to come along, fine. But the whole idea is not to sell my books, but is to create new information so that our people will have a legacy, a heritage that they can look upon when they are challenged. Because these are critical and challenging times, and we must have knowledge to survive. Knowledge is power, but Brother Trust remind us, knowledge may be taught. What?
Okay, who has a question for Monderson? Ask Monderson the question.
Hello? Yeah.
Walter, anybody wants to ask Monderson anything?
No, I'm done, thanks.
What was the question you asked?
Oh, you mean earlier?
Yes.
Oh, I was sort of just making a statement about, how they spin the Greeks and the Romans in the sense that paleopathology admits, they openly admit, I guess since 98, the late 90s, that the Greeks left northern Russia, that is somewhere from western Siberia over to the Volga Valley. They left there around 2500 BC and they started to migrate south. So that explains everything real quick. The Romans left that same area about 2000 BC. The Persians also, the Persians are their cousins. They left northern Russia from western Siberia over west to the Volga Valley around 2000 BC. The group that left first, Van Sertima talked about this, but I guess everybody ignored him. The group that left there first were the people we now call the Germanic tribes, but they didn't go south. They went west. They went west, northwest to the northern peninsula, like Norway, Sweden, Denmark.
Okay.
And they became like the Vikings, type people. They left 6000 BC. What's interesting though in paleopathology is this, is that, and Van Sertima said this, everybody ignored him. He said, so-called original African Negroid, however you want to say it, type, began to transform into a pale type from 50,000 to 40,000 BC. That's sort of still accepted. The key was once that happened, here's what's puzzling in paleopathology is, why did they stay there until 6000 BC? You know what I mean? That's what's the puzzling part. They existed in northern
West bank of the Nile
Okay,
River. Near modern.
Whoever,
Let me answer this guy, this brother here.
Okay, you gotta mute, whoever's on, you gotta mute so Monderson can answer Walter.
Okay, two things about your information, right? First of all, let's take the second note thing you mentioned, right? That Dr. Diop, Civilization of Barbarism, has the best sketch of that Africa invasion of Europe that goes back to perhaps about 70,000, 80,000. Right? You are well within the later phase of that. But even more interesting is your comment about the emergence of the Greeks and the Romans, right, around, let us say, after or approximately 2000 BC, right? Now, when you were saying that, I got the idea that these guys didn't come dressed in suits and bow ties, okay? They were ragged groups who, for whatever reason, perhaps out of absence of food and other amenities, migrated for a better life. But they only come on the scene at around 2000. Dr. Obenga speaks of philosophy that the Greek philosophy began in the 5th century, while the African philosophy began at 2780. His book, African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, extends from 2780 to 333 BC. So all of this is happening. And if you remember what I just said, that Dr. Diop ties the prehistoric to the archaic to the Old Kingdom period, when the concrete foundation of African Egyptian thought, religion, and artistic skills were developed and laid. That was before even these people became noticeable on the historical continuum. But they didn't have anything, okay? It would take the Greeks 1,000 years. Of course, it is said that Homer, his two books, Odyssey and Iliad, were written in the 8th century. That's not correct. It was probably oral and then written down later. Why? Okay, if you go to Abu Simbel, where Ramses II built his temple, a twin temple, one to himself and one to his wife Nefertari, there is an inscription there that says that during the time of Psammiticus, and if you remember from one of the earlier lectures where I talk about Psammiticus confronted with the Greek invasion of Egypt, did two things. He confined the Greeks to a city called Naucratis and had everybody, all of them that were scattered all throughout Egypt, confined to that one spot. So the Greeks were satisfied and his people were satisfied. So out of one item, two opposing forces will come back. So at Abu Simbel, there is an inscription, right? And it's considered to be the first, earliest Greek Ionian inscription. And it says that there were 200,000 Egyptians stationed at that southern border. And because they were not paid for about 2 or 3 years, they left and went into Nubia. Well, okay, so they tell us that the Egyptians are red people. But where are these red people? They're not there. The Greeks were Europeans in ancient times. They're still Europeans, they're still right there. So the falsity, and that is, I don't recall how many times I used that term in tonight's presentation. Perhaps one of you wonderful people would have made a note of that. But the whole presentation of the knowledge of the ancient Africans is based on falsity. Falsity standing on the quicksand of history, and all of the pillars are sinking.
All right, thank you, Doc. All right, I hope that answers. And Walter, you know, you could always come down with Monderson and talk to them face to face. It looks like Lady V has a little something to say, so we're gonna let Lady V.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question.
Okay, go ahead, say it loud.
Have you visited Anthony Browder's, the tomb that he found with his daughter?
Okay, the question is, has Dr. Monderson visited Anthony Browder's tomb that he's excavating? I think it's the tomb of
Karakoman.
Right, so that's the question that Veronica is asking Dr. Monderson, and he's gonna give a reply in 3 minutes.
You asked a very profound question there, sister.
No, it's yes or no.
I said, you asked a very profound question, okay? First of all, I was one of the first people that he announced the discovery of this tomb by the Russian lady. Reverend Dillon had a place on Atlantic Avenue. He came there and spoke. In 2010, I was in Egypt when there was a conference. Egypt in the last decade of the 20th century. It was presented, and they had groups. I went to the tomb, and he said to me, among a lot of things on that, no pictures, because it's an archaeological site, and they couldn't. Okay. So now, I was in Egypt in June last month. I guess who I saw? Anthony Browder. I didn't stumble on the face, you know, but he's still there. He had a group with him. And I said to him, I started having breakfast. I was leaving. I was going to Aswan. They just came in the night before. And I asked him about it. He said, the tomb is finished, but it's up to the Egyptians to open it. Okay? So you got to understand that the people who are in Egypt today, who control and own Egypt, are not truly
Not the
Africans.
same one.
Okay?
They white folks.
They're Arabs. Okay? So they move at their own pace. And if it doesn't fit their narrative,
They're not letting you.
they're not, you know. So, I mean, look,
Indians to
yeah, well, that's the new people that they're bringing. You know, in the Caribbean, Guyana especially, 1834, when the British outlawed the slave institution of slavery, they brought in the 1834. They told the Africans, okay, now you're free. So we can give you you have to spend 4 years of apprenticeship. We've been apprentices for all our lives. They brought in these Indians from India as a buffer between the Africans who were freed and the other elements of the society. So right now, the security people in Egypt is the same Indians, right? But in answer to your question, according to what he said last month, the tomb is finished, but the people are holding the keys. So how soon they will get to the tourist circuit is still determinable. Okay? So that's it. Now the other question, sir?
And basically, the African does not have control of Egypt. Dr. Browder stated when he first started the excavation that they had used the tomb of Krakamoon as a waste. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken boxes, all kind of stuff was garbage. And they went down there. This is from what Dr. Browder said, and they went down there and had to start cleaning that stuff out first. So
okay, hold on.
they don't have. This is what he said.
He also said he was there first, and then that woman you discussed came along with funds because you need funds to finance digging up that tomb.
And want to see the YouTube video with Lefkowitz, Martin, Bernal, and Dr. Clark,
We was there for that, right?
you can go on YouTube and Dr. Clark, they did an excellent debate on the books.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, okay, wait a minute, okay. We can be emotional when we are dealing with intellectual activity. Okay. That tomb, as well as several others, we are talking about more than 2,000 years of native habitation, okay? Some of the temples you see, you go in there and you see the black smoke on the ceiling. We were living there, right? They didn't have this flush toilet. You know, the guy said, even about England, what was the last sentence? That, the umbrella? You remember the umbrella? The umbrella we used? He said the umbrella wasn't really for rain. No, they were trying to step out through the window. So you had the umbrella
To protect yourself.
to protect yourself, right? So they were living there. You have to expect that. Those people, the Temple of Luxor, it was a whole community was living there. They had, it's just like today, we got people squatting in your houses. Your grandmother left the house or whatever, you move south and you go back, people are living in there. And it's hell to get them out. You know, so these people were living in these structures, and naturally these things accumulate. And all of the tombs that they're cleaned out today, you know, those that were open from antiquity, you know, 2,000 years of operation. So that's expected. But don't get carried away that, you know, the streets are not swept like we sweep. You gotta have alternative side parking today. Deal with the leg of the chicken, not the wings, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So, another question? Anyone else? Hello?
Hi, my name is Ricardo Taylor. I just want to make a comment. I just want to thank the elders and the guest speaker to speak and share this information. As a young person, I find it very valuable. So just
Go ahead.
keep doing what y'all do, and just a lot of respect to y'all.
Go ahead. Let's hear what you have to say.
He said he was thanking the elders.
Oh, I thought you wanted to make
He
a
said
comment.
thank you to the elders.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so give Dr. Monderson a great big hand on the Mysteries of Egypt Part 1. He will be coming back for Part 2.
I'll hold him to that.
No, Dr. Monderson knows he'll be back, so the lecture will be on YouTube tomorrow. You can go back into it. We want to thank everybody for participating, good, bad, or indifferent, and supporting the BK History Club. We want to thank you for coming down. All information is for educational purposes. You do your research, you take what you need. If you don't need it, you don't do nothing with it. As Dr. Mackey would say, you're only scratching the surface. And with information. So there's no right and there's no wrong. But I do know one thing. We have a lot of people who want to make statements. And if you don't know, or at least try to know a little something about history, and go and take up the mantle of Monderson, Clark, Van Sertima, Dr. Lewis, because they didn't have to do what they did. El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Runoko Rashidi, Professor George Simmons, George G.M. James, all of these people, John Hope Franklin, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune, like I said. they offered Malcolm X $500,000, and at that time it was a lot of money. So if you want any of Dr. Monderson's books, you go on Amazon, you give them a play, because nobody's right and nobody's wrong. All we want to do is give information, because we don't know what's going to happen later on.
Good point.
And our kids are not looking at information. That's why people can say anything and we don't know. So give them a great big hand and give yourself a great big hand. We're going to cut
Good job, bro, Monderson. Good job.
We're going to cut
Thank you, Rob.
the talk to Monderson. I'm going to cut the camera off. There's a lot of things happening. It's a lot of things going on. And if you don't know what's going on, you're going to fall victim, because whoever controls the media controls the mind. And midterm elections is coming, and it's all about you better wake up and see what's happening, because everything that's happening is not happening. We do not control the media. That's why elections were so important. That's why UAM was so important.
Can I say one thing before we
UNIA. And congratulations to Raymond and Veronica was down there, and Michael Duncan, and thank you for having that convention. Hopefully next year we have enough sense, and I have enough sense to get down there. But I want to give them a big thanks, because they're trying very hard, and it's a hard task in America to change our minds. Good, bad, or indifferent. Thank you.
That brother Everett is doing a wonderful job. Oh my gosh. Foundational or whatever.